Naruto. There is a big problem with my love life options. Chapter 21. I am invincible here. 1. Take out the original Hokage boxer shorts from your pocket as a gift to your teacher. Open black lens bracket 2. Tell Danzo, you don't want to be his disciple, but you want to be his younger brother. Close black lens bracket. 3. Dance him a piece of Disco Elysium and ask him if he likes such a disciple. Ellipsis ellipsis. Yifeng fell into silence, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. How to choose this BYD? The three options are all about the same level of disgusting. Option 1 required him to hand over the original Hokage boxer briefs, which he didn't have at the moment. But Yifeng knew that if he chose this, a pair would definitely appear in his pocket to help him complete the task. This dog system is really powerful in some ways. No matter how outrageous the prerequisites are, as long as you choose it, you will be guaranteed to complete it. Damn, that's surprisingly thoughtful. But he didn't want to touch the Hokage's original boxer briefs. Just thinking about it was enough to make him, a person with a slight misophobia, feel sick, not to mention having to hold it with his hands. The same goes for option 2. Although he only needed to say these words, he really couldn't say them, as they had already exceeded his bottom line. Option 3 was certainly not any better. The word, Disco Elysium, sounded very strange, and it gave him a bad feeling. But compared to that, he was willing to take a gamble. What if it wasn't what he thought? After taking a breath, Yifeng made up his mind. Thump. Suddenly, a powerful music sounded in his mind. Under Danzo's incredulous and stunned gaze, Yifeng opened his arms. His body began to tremble slightly, and his hands touched his thighs and chest. Shaolin Yifeng, what are you doing? Danzo asked with a dark face and twitching mouth. Yifeng did not answer immediately, but began to swing his feet rhythmically, turning his body in circles. His hands were buckled around his belt, and his entire waist and abdomen rose and fell. Now not only Danzo, but also the root members who were on guard nearby turned their eyes over. Staring at Yifeng's movements, I was stunned for a moment. Dancing. This young man actually performed such an immoral dance in front of Master Danzo. Stop right there, you bastard. Danzo could no longer bear it and shouted angrily. He was a traditional and conservative ninja, so how could he stand such hot dance steps? What's more, the person dancing in front of him was a teenager. If this got out, would he still have face? Bang! Yifeng jumped high up and did a 180-degree backflip in the air. He landed directly with a big split, made a gesture of farewell and said, Master Danzo, do you like a disciple like me? Silence. The drooping skin on Danzo's face trembled violently, and he said nothing. After a long while, he turned around decisively and left with his cane in hand. The original purpose of accepting a disciple was to save face and to completely defeat Hiruzen. But he didn't expect that this young man seemed to be a little mentally ill. Who would dare to accept him as a disciple? Losing face or not is no big deal. Danzo is afraid that one day he will be so angry that he will explode. I can't afford it, bye. Tisk, this is such a pity. Yifeng said in a low voice, patting his clothes and standing up. It seems that I will not be able to become the disciple of Elder Danzo. Is it embarrassing? Kushina's voice sounded. Sister, what are you talking about? Yifeng pretended to be calm. It must be uncomfortable to pretend that you don't care to hide your embarrassment, Kushina said softly. Shut up, don't say it's spicy. Yifeng broke down immediately. From Danzo's perspective, he is a psychopath, but Yifeng himself knows very well that he is a normal person. How can it not be embarrassing to be forced to dance like that by the system? If Kushina hadn't mentioned it, he could have pretended nothing had happened, but now that his disguise had been exposed, he felt like dying. Actually, I wanted to praise you. Kushina spoke again, smiling. What? Yifeng instinctively felt that she had bad intentions, but he couldn't help being curious. Your butt is moving nicely, very seductive. If you change your career and work in a sex shop, I think you will most likely become a top star. Yifeng was so angry that his lips turned purple. He felt that he was really a bad mouth and had to ask that question. What the hell, she's the top shop owner in a custom shop. Is that something you can say to a child? I feel like my wife has been getting more and more naughty lately. Which bastard taught her such bad things? It seems to be me, so it's okay. Open black lens bracket. Congratulations on obtaining the character card of Aizen Sosuke. Close black lens bracket. The system prompt popped up, and Yifeng's eyes suddenly widened. Fuck. What's going on? Kushina also sensed his strong emotional fluctuations, and asked with a puzzled look on her face, the curse has come again. What is it this time? Running around the Konoha playground naked. No, we are invincible this time. Yifeng held the shiny card in his hand, his body trembling slightly. Thanks to myself, the humiliation and suffering finally paid off. Open black lens bracket. This character card can be used immediately. Close black lens bracket. After use, you can obtain all the strength, abilities, experience, memory, and science and technology of Aizen Sosuke during the time of the Lord of Hawako Mundo and receive key items as a gift. Invincible. Kushina obviously hadn't reacted yet. It was not until Yifeng slapped the card on her chest that she felt a surge of strange energy rushing towards her, just like a tide, one wave after another. As Yifeng's symbiotic soul body, she also enjoyed great benefits when Yifeng's soul essence underwent earth-shaking changes. During this flushing process, the quality of Kushina's soul was also raised exponentially. It was not until the tide of energy receded that she saw that the world she lived in had undergone earth-shaking changes. The soul-enriching pearl, which originally could only hold a small bed, is now large enough to hold a mountain. Strange energy that is as solid as a substance floats in the air, emitting a deep blue halo. What on earth is this? Kushina's eyes widened, and she suddenly felt as if she had an extra energy in her body that she could use. She waved her hand gently, and a white gauze skirt was draped over her body. Yifeng, what on earth did you just do? Kushina said with a moved face as the spirit pearl emerged from her body. This skirt suits you very well, ma'am. Yifeng said with a gentle smile. Hey. Why are you speaking in this tone now? Kushina frowned and said, I'm really not used to it. You have to try to get used to it, ma'am. Yifeng curled his lips and said confidently, from today on, there will be no rivals ahead of us. No, you need to recover first. Kushina took a breath and said with an expression that was trying hard to suppress her annoyance, why are you even missing your dead fish eyes now? Tell me what happened, where are you going now? Let's go to the glasses store. Yifeng regained his lazy eyes and spread his hands, saying, I feel like something is missing from my face, so I'm going to buy a pair of glasses. It's been a long time since I last went to school. Yifeng stood in front of the ninja school gate with an emotional expression on his face. What do you mean by long time no see? It's been only 4 days since you left. Kushina's voice sounded, and she said it very unceremoniously. But it's been a long time since we last met, isn't it? Yifeng didn't get angry, and said in a gentle tone, although it was only 4 days, a lot of things happened. That's true. Kushina thought for a moment and agreed. Next, let's enjoy our limited student life. Yifeng raised the corners of his mouth slightly, saying meaningfully. Yeah, but you're the student. Kushina snorted and said calmly, I'm your guardian. You can think whatever you want. Yifeng didn't argue with her about this matter. There was no need. Come to think of it, have you really obtained all the power of Aizen Sosuke? Kushina spoke again. She has received the memory of the anime, Bleach, from Yifeng, so she naturally knows very well what kind of person this, Aizen Sosuke, is. Invincible. Kushina had to admit that Yifeng was truly invincible now. Even if the legendary Azuki goddess appeared on the spot, she would probably cry and get slapped twice. Didn't we see it last night? Yifeng asked with a smile. That's just a part of it, it's not really power. Kushina muttered softly, and said, and is there really nothing wrong with the thing you made? If it spreads out, it will be very troublesome, right? That's just a prototype, so it looks unstable. Yi Feng smiled and said confidently, when it becomes what we really want, it will be the time to reap the rewards. I really can't imagine what expressions the people in the ninja world will have when they see that thing. Kushina sighed. Ambitious people will want it, and ordinary people will be afraid of it. Yi Feng paused and said softly, but for us, it is just a means for us to realize our plan. There is no need to resist too much, ma'am. Call me sister. Okay, sister. Don't play Aizen's role-playing game when you talk to me, it's so scary. Kushina demanded. Those who know Aizen well know how cruel and domineering he is beneath his gentle appearance. Kushina doesn't want Yi Feng to become that kind of person. Even if she had to play a role, she hoped that she could be the other party's anchor. At least when facing her, Yi Feng could show her true nature and would not be covered by Aizen's personality. Otherwise, it would be an unspeakable disaster for the whole world. Compared with this, the crisis brought by Kagaya Otsutsuki is nothing more than a younger brother. If Yi Feng knew what this lady was thinking at this moment, he would definitely laugh out loud. As a pure materialist, how could he not distinguish between fantasy and reality? His personality would not be covered by any other existence, he would always be himself. Of course. At this time, Yi Feng was still unaware of his wife's worries. He just thought that this was a very reasonable request from the other party, so he nodded decisively and said, okay. Yi Feng-jun, a weak voice sounded. Yi Feng and Kushina looked over and saw a short-haired girl with gray-white pupils. She looked at Yi Feng with great joy, but didn't dare to approach him. Haven't seen you for a long time. It's only been 4 days since we last met, Miss Hinata. Yi Feng smiled gently and said, but thank you for recognizing me at first sight. Today, Yi Feng wears the same black framed glasses as Aizen, and his pupils under the lenses are no longer dead fish eyes. Mrs. Kushina said that people who were not familiar with him would not recognize him. But she did not expect that Miss Hinata, who had not spoken much, could call out his name so quickly. Yes. Hinata lowered her head with a screwed expression on her face. I used the words, long time no see, on impulse. What a fool I am. But for her, it really felt like she hadn't seen Yi Fengjun for a long time. This should be what adults often say, days pass by like years. It's time for class, Miss Hinata. Yi Feng stepped forward and said with a smile, let's go into the classroom. Yeah, okay. Hinata nodded obediently and followed Yi Feng into the classroom. What a lovely little girl. Your son will be blessed in the future. Yi Feng said with emotion in his heart. Kushina now knew all the plots of Naruto, so she naturally knew why the other party said that. But her expression was quite strange at this time, and she frowned and said, Yi Feng, are you sure Naruto will be with her in the future? Well, it's that old thief Kishimoto's destined marriage. Yi Feng chuckled. Have you ever thought that you are the wings of a butterfly? Have you met Miss Hinata often before? How is that possible? He is a wealthy man in Konoha. Yi Feng smiled and said in an exaggerated tone, civilians like us will be driven away if we get close. But I have known her for a long time. You still remember the original plot, right? When she was a child, she was bullied by those little brats, and I brought Naruto to help her out. Is that so? That's not surprising. Kushina sighed and said faintly, is it possible that she transferred her admiration for Naruto in the original story to you? Huh. Yi Feng was stunned. Don't you realize that this girl obviously has a crush on you? Kushina said lightly. No, this. Yi Feng really hadn't thought about this, or he had never carefully observed Hinata's attitude towards him. Now, hearing Kushina say this, I felt a sense of embarrassment. This is simply like trying to steal someone's daughter-in-law right in front of them. I don't think it matters. There's no such thing as destiny. Kushina breathed a sigh of relief and spoke in a consoling tone. My silly boy was not favored because he was unlucky, but Yi Feng. What's wrong? Yi Feng felt very stiff at this time. If this lady got angry at him or asked him to stay away from Hinata in the future, he could accept it. But what kind of method was this? It really tormented his conscience. Kushina was silent for a moment, and then said in a disembodied voice, there are already enough girls around you now, so you'd better be careful when you sleep at night. Threaten it. Yifeng felt that this was definitely a threat. Yifeng. A yellow-haired figure appeared and rescued Yifeng from the tormenting hell. You actually went to travel alone, how unkind of you. When did you become nearsighted? Shikamaru, who was standing next to the little yellow-haired boy, noticed the new decoration on Yifeng's face. This is a decoration for role-playing. Yifeng pointed at his glasses and said solemnly, and I'm not going to travel, I'm going to save a country. Silence. After he said this, the whole area was silent for more than 10 seconds. PFF'd. Ha 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 ha. Naruto laughed out loud while holding his stomach. He wiped the tears from his face and said, "You are still the most interesting one. I can hear very interesting jokes every day. Madam, your son looks really silly when he smiles." Yifeng sighed. Who does this idiot follow? Kushina asked sincerely wondering. Well, what's new in school during the days I was away? Yifeng, Shikamaru and Naruto sat in their seats, and other students in the class also walked into the classroom one after another. Does it count if that arrogant Sasuke received another confession from a girl? Naruto said angrily. Naruto-kun, that's every day. Shikamaru sighed and said leisurely, it's not new. As they were talking, Haruno Sakura with a bow on her head and Ino with a ponytail appeared in the sight of Yifeng and the others. Sakura. Naruto's dog-licking attribute was instantly activated and he shouted with joy. Sakura and Ino were no longer surprised by this and simply ignored Naruto, who was emitting strong hormones, and turned their eyes to a young man who had completely changed his style. Are you Xiaolin Yifeng? It's changed a lot. Both Sakura and Ino had surprised expressions on their faces and stared at his new look. Good morning, Miss Haruno, Miss Yamanaka. Yifeng greeted them in a gentle voice. Hiss, what did you call me? Yamanaka. Ino stared, as if she had seen a ghost. Miss Yamanaka. Not only your appearance, but also your personality has changed. She remembered that this guy called her a Shan a few days ago. No, I just had some new insights these days. Yifeng showed a smile as warm as spring breeze on his face. Grunt. Not only Ino, but even Sakura was a little stunned. I didn't expect that this nonchalant guy would exude such extraordinary charm once he becomes serious. Sakura began to understand why Ino treated this guy differently. What a potential stalk. New insights. Ino muttered in a low voice, but didn't say anything else. He pulled his friend who was still standing there stupidly and sat in the seat in front of Yifeng. Hey, Yifeng. Naruto suddenly spoke, leaning his head over and whispered. What's wrong? Yifeng looked over. Where did you buy those glasses? I want to try out a new look, too. Naruto obviously noticed the amazing look in Sakura's eyes when she looked at Yifeng just now, and he was very envious. If he also wore this pair of glasses, would Sakura also look at him differently? Sister, your son. Yifeng obviously saw what Naruto was thinking, and his expression was a little indescribable. It's hopeless. Kushina sighed sadly. Yifeng also shook his head slightly and said softly, listen to me, buddy. You can't handle my style. Impossible, I don't believe it. Naruto looked unyielding. So, what exactly did you do when you left the village? Shikamaru asked to change the subject, interrupting Naruto's continued nagging. Shikamaru obviously didn't believe the other party's claim that he went to save a country. It was really ridiculous. But something extraordinary must have happened to this good friend of mine, otherwise it would be impossible to explain why his personality and temperament had changed so much. Even the dead fish eyes that had accompanied him for 10 years disappeared. Well, actually I went on a blind date. Yifeng spread his hands. Are you kidding me? Blind date. Now not only Shikamaru and Naruto, but even Sakura and Ino in the front row couldn't help but turn their heads. Hey, would you be willing to go on a blind date? Shikamaru still had some doubts about this and looked suspicious. There are blind dates in the ninja world as well. And since children in the ninja world generally mature early, blind dates in their teens are not too strange. But based on Shikamaru's understanding of Yifeng, This guy obviously thinks girls are troublesome creatures just like him. How could he be willing to take the initiative to go on a blind date with someone? There is obviously something wrong with this. Of course I don't want to. Yifeng sighed and said half-truthfully, but sometimes fate forces people to make choices. This is also a kind of helplessness. Forced by fate. Shikamaru instinctively felt that his friend's words were full of meaning. Just as he was about to continue asking, Sakura accidentally changed the subject. What does the girl you're dating look like? Is she pretty? Very beautiful. Yifeng nodded, and said solemnly, she has beautiful burgundy hair, a gentle temperament, and a bright smile. To describe her, she is like a big tomato. You fucking. Hearing the last sentence, Kushina gritted her teeth in anger. Tomato was the word the bullies used to tease her when she was in school. This jerk said it at this time just to mess with her mentality. Big tomato. Sakura was also stunned. How could this thing be used to describe a girl's beauty? A big tomato. Naruto pondered for a moment, pursed his lips and nodded. Well, then this girl is really cute. There's something wrong with you too. Sakura looked at Naruto with an incomprehensible weirdness in her eyes. Could it be that this guy thinks he looks like a tomato? Madam, you heard it. Your son also said you are cute. Yifeng smiled in his heart. Shut up. Kushina in the Soul Pearl gritted her teeth and said angrily, do you believe that I will get out and stab you to death right now? She was forced to go on a blind date with him and even said that she was a tomato. She will remember this. Ah, Sasuke is here. Sakura exclaimed, staring at a hedgehog-headed boy who looked almost identical to Naruto in his previous dog-licking state. However, Sasuke, who was as cold as a fish killer in RT Mart, ignored him completely. Instead, Yifeng's new outfit made him look slightly surprised. But he soon lost interest and calmly sat back in his seat. Speaking of which, the grade competition is coming up soon. Ino stretched out a finger and tapped her chin, and said softly, one of the students from our class should be Sasuke, I wonder who the other one will be. Maybe Aburame-san. Sakura looked at the second row on the left and guessed, I've always felt that he's very mysterious and his abilities are probably hidden. Sakura, why don't you think it's me? Naruto asked a little aggrieved. Sakura glanced at him impatiently and pouted, how can you be so ignorant of yourself as the last place finisher? Kobayashi's chance of being selected is higher than yours. Just as she finished her words, Iruka, wearing a green vest, walked into the classroom. He put down the lesson plan in his hand and smiled slightly. Dear students, the grade competition will begin in a week. After my comprehensive consideration of the actual combat abilities of each student, I have determined that the players from our class will be Uchiha Sasuke and Kobayashi Yifeng. Silence. As soon as these words were spoken, the whole class fell silent. Uchiha Sasuke's combat ability was obvious to all the students present, but Shaolin Yifeng, what kind of monster is that? Are you serious, Iruka-sensei? Do you really want to let this genius who created the Answer Starry Sky technique play? Even the Hokage of Konoha and the elders will come to watch the game. Do you not want your job as a teacher anymore? As another contestant, Uchiha Sasuke's expression was as if he was struck by lightning. The so-called grade competition. Before challenging the first in the grade, there must be a class competition first. I called Shaolin Yifeng, the creator of Answer Defense Stars. Is this true? Sasuke's forehead was covered with sweat, and he suddenly felt a chill down his spine. The two students whose names were called, if you have any opinions, you can raise them now. Iruka was very humane and asked Sasuke and Yifeng for their opinions on the spot. If the two really didn't want to participate, he wouldn't force them. I have no problem, Teacher Iruka. Yifeng agreed without hesitation. This puts pressure on Sasuke. To be honest, the orphan of the Uchiha family really wanted to refuse. He was not afraid of a head-on confrontation, and was confident that he could defeat anyone of the same age. The only opponent he least wanted to meet in his life was Shaolin Yifeng. When the fight is going on, there will suddenly be an attack during the defense. Who the hell can withstand that? So, Should he refuse? If he refused at this time, wouldn't it mean that he was afraid of the other party? If it was just his personal reputation, it wouldn't matter. The key point was that he was now representing the face of the entire Uchiha clan. If he refused, wouldn't it bring shame to the entire Uchiha clan? Think about this. Sasuke took a deep breath, his eyes gradually became firm and he said, "It's okay for me too." He hoped that Shaolin Yifeng would fight him properly, but just in case, he would have to use his secret equipment. I dare say this child of Makoto's family must have gone through an intense ideological game. Kushina said in a tone of seeing through everything. What do you mean? Yifeng asked puzzledly. You were pretending to be me, right? Have you forgotten what you said in front of the whole class? Kushina sneered and said, anyone would have a headache facing an opponent like you who can lose the defense. What do you mean by losing the defense? I have no idea what you are talking about, ma'am. It's no use pretending to have amnesia. Who in the whole class doesn't know about your famous trick? Ah, what are we having for dinner? Haha, there are times when you are unwilling to face up to your dark history. Kushina said with a playful smile. Yifeng still pretended to be stupid, looked up at the sky and said, how about a simple tomato scrambled eggs? Shut up and don't mention tomatoes to me again. Your orders, Your Majesty. Piss off. Time passed quickly while we were laughing and having fun. As the school bell rang, Yifeng picked up his backpack and prepared to leave. Hey, Yifeng. Naruto pulled him back and said with a grin, let's eat ramen together tonight. Let's do it another day. We have a dinner party today. Yifeng said gently. Ah. Naruto was stunned for a moment, then asked, who did you have dinner with? Did you make other friends without telling anyone? Blind date. Yifeng answered decisively. The one with red hair. Naruto scratched his head. Yes, I'll introduce you to each other someday. Yifeng put his hand on his shoulder and said solemnly, but not today. I have to go back and prepare a candlelight dinner with her. After saying this, he turned and left. Damn, this bastard is so enviable. Naruto looked a little jealous. Is his blind date from Konoha? Shikamaru frowned as he watched him leave. If that's the case, why did he leave the village? Very mysterious. Shikamaru had always felt that his good friend's thoughts were hard to figure out, but now they seemed even more mysterious. Yifeng's house. When are you going to confess to your two good brothers what you are doing now? Kushina asked softly. It's not the right time yet. Yifeng paused for a moment and said, wait until our plan is initially completed, then slowly reveal it to them. Otherwise, I'm worried that they won't be able to accept it. Ha, that's true. Kushina sneered, her expression playful. If Naruto knew that the person you went on a blind date with and had a candlelight dinner with was his biological mother, do you think he would beat you to death on the spot? I don't think so. Yifeng was silent for a moment, then said seriously, I will tell him in person that his mother and I are truly in love. Bah, who says I'm in love with you? Little brat. Kushina's cheeks flushed and she drilled back into Yifeng's body. It's just a joke, don't be angry. HMPH, are you going to continue studying that dangerous thing now? Being not. Yifeng reached out and gently knocked on the wall on the left side of his house. With a click, a black passage appeared on the ground beneath his feet. Walking down the stairs, a huge space comes into view. The ceiling was inlaid with dazzling fluorescent stones, illuminating the entire space. On the left side of the space was a huge transparent jar, in which a strange milky white object was immersed. As Yifeng approached, the strange white object seemed to come alive and kept changing its shape. The things in front of him in this underground space were created by Yifeng in one night after he obtained all of Aizen's abilities. The development of the underground space was actually very simple and only took a few minutes. Most of the time was spent on this strange white object. Creating a special power that does not exist in this ninja world from nothing is not an easy task, even with the combined knowledge and experience of Yifeng, a time traveler, and Aizen, the big boss of the God of Death. Fortunately, it was finally done. Sure enough, this thing makes my scalp tingle just looking at it. Kushina commented. Don't resist. It's the future for us. The future of transforming the ninja world. Yifeng chuckled and said slowly, besides, madam, you will eventually merge with it too. Hearing you say that, I feel even more creepy. Kushina took a deep breath. It just needs to grow. Yifeng looked up at the broken jade floating on the jar and said lightly, maybe we should find a few volunteers for it. Are you planning to conduct human experiments? Kushina asked in surprise. I've found a good candidate. What do you think of Lord Danzo? Yifeng said with a smile on his face. I don't approve of human experiments. Kushina paused, her voice became lighter, but Danzo-sama will definitely have no problem with it. As that's so. Yifeng walked to the other side of the space, and another black passage opened. I know you won't object. Human experiments were not allowed, but in their eyes Danzo was not considered a human being. Kushina looked at the exit in front of her and said in surprise, you actually dug through the memorial. Did you do this on purpose? I thought you knew it a long time ago. Yifeng spread his hands. Who knows the route underground? What are you going to do? Kushina's mouth twitched and she said, stop it. Grave robbing is illegal. No. Yifeng shook his head decisively, and said firmly, I'm ready to give Obito-kun a little surprise. You. Kushina was speechless, and suddenly realized that the boy did this for her again. How can I pay it back, you idiot? Let's get started. Yifeng found Nohara Lin's tombstone and was about to make some moves. But at this moment, the familiar golden color popped up again. Open black lens bracket shoes. Close black lens bracket. 1. Use the Impure World reincarnation to summon Konoha White Fang and ask him to witness your love with Hitaki Kakashi. 2. Use Impure World reincarnation to summon Sarutobi Bawako and order her to seduce Danzo. 3. Use Impure World reincarnation to summon Uchiha Makoto and tell her that you want to be the father of her child. Damn it! The bright smile on Yifeng's face suddenly disappeared, replaced by darkness. Damn it! This damn system jumps out again to show off its presence. Yifeng gritted his teeth, his face full of anger. The key is that BYD always comes up with some confusing options, and no matter which one you choose, it will make you feel so uncomfortable that you want to vomit blood. Just like right in front of us. The first option allows him to summon Konoha White Fang, also known as Hitaki Tsukumo, Kakashi's old father and former Anbu who was driven to suicide by gossip in the village. He is already pitiful enough, and this damn system allows him to be summoned to witness the love between Kakashi and Yifeng. What a fucking love. Although he doesn't discriminate against homosexuals, please don't get close to me, okay? The second option is also explosive. Sarutobi Bawako, the late wife of the third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, was killed by the newborn Obito while helping Kushina deliver her baby. She is a marginal character who is only mentioned once in the original anime. It can be said that Sarutobi Hiruzen is not a very open-minded person. If it weren't for his indulgence and support, several high-ranking officials in Konoha wouldn't have become so corrupt. If there was a chance to discredit him, Yifeng wouldn't hesitate. But the Hokage is the Hokage, and his wife is his wife. It is really disgusting to exploit someone's deceased wife. Yifeng passed the first two items without hesitation, but to be honest, the third item was not much better. Uchiha Makoto, the biological mother of Sasuke and Itachi, died in the Uchiha clan extermination several years ago, killed by her eldest son. It is hard to imagine how a mother felt when she was killed by her own child. It was already so difficult when he was alive, and now that he was dead he was summoned by himself for entertainment. This made Yifeng's conscience ache a little. But there is no other way. In order to protect the biological mother of my friends, I can only let this lady down temporarily. Yifeng took a deep breath and walked towards the Uchiha clan cemetery. Sister, the plan has changed. Huh? Kushina asked in confusion. I'm afraid Ms. Nohara Lin's summoning plan will have to be put on hold for the time being. Yifeng explained. Are you going to give up? Kushina was silent for a moment, then comforted him, that's fine. It's just a matter between Obito and me, There's no need to disturb Lin's soul. No, I mean, I have to disturb another ghost first. Another one. Who? She's right here. Yifeng walked to a tombstone and stopped. Kushina in the soul orb looked at the words, Uchiha Makoto's tomb, in front of her, and said with her eyes slightly wide open, Yifeng, you are not going to tell me that this is another curse. What else? Yifeng looked very annoyed. Is it possible that you are essentially a wife control freak, but you don't want to bear the stigma? So you made up a curse as a cover to make an excuse for yourself? Kushina said sharply. The term, wife control, is a bit too much. I have always been a pure love party. Yifeng retorted. Oh. Kushina didn't comment, but her eyes clearly showed disdain. Pure love party. Who is this bastard trying to make laugh to death? Anyway, I have a reason to do it now. Yifeng took a stance and formed seals with his hands. The art of reincarnation from dirty soil. The glowing light like confetti was flying all over the sky. A graceful woman with long black hair and home clothes appeared with a confused look in her eyes. Boom. Just like the last accident when Kushina was summoned, Mrs. Makoto in front of her also had her clothes exploded. However, Yifeng, who had experience and ability, did not let her embarrass herself, and directly stepped forward to grab her hand. The gathered spirit particles condensed on her body surface into a pitch-black long skirt, covering her body. Under Uchiha Makoto's astonished gaze, Yifeng said stiffly, well, I want to be the father of your child. Damn the dog system. What kind of torture is this? It's really shameful to say this. Fuck. Sluggish. Uchiha Makoto, whose palm was grasped by him, had a dazed look on her face, her eyes revealing deep confusion and bewilderment. What's the situation now? If her memory was correct, she should be dead, right? But why did she reappear in the world? This gentle boy in front of her wanted to be the father of her child. Is this a marriage proposal? I should have died, but I was proposed to by a child younger than Itachi. Wait, this is so messy. Uchiha Makoto covered her forehead with one hand, trying to comprehend what was happening before her eyes. Madam, someone is coming over there. Yifeng suddenly spoke, interrupting her thoughts and said, you don't want our current relationship to be discovered, do you? Then, what should we do? Mrs. Makoto was subconsciously a little flustered, and she didn't even know why she was flustered. I have a way, don't resist. Yifeng activated the spiritual beads in his body, and a strange suction force enveloped Mrs. Makoto's soul. Call out. Mrs. Masaki turned into a beam of black light and drilled into Yifeng's body. She only suddenly reacted after entering the soul yunning pearl. It seems like there is nothing between him and me, right? Open black lens bracket. Congratulations on obtaining the super dress-up technique. Close black lens bracket. After taking a look at the system's reward prompt, Yifeng raised his eyebrows. This ability can create something out of nothing with one click, and it can change not only clothes, but also shoes, facial decorations and headdresses. Great. Now I don't have to carry luggage when I travel anymore. Pat, pat. A rhythmic sound of footsteps was heard, and Yifeng looked at the person who was coming. He has a hedgehog head, wears a black tight suit, and has a bright little white flower on his chest. What a coincidence. Yifeng secretly complained in his heart, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. The person who came was actually Mrs. Makoto's youngest son, Uchiha Sasuke. Mrs. Masaki, who was stored in the soul-enriching pearl, also saw her best friend who had died long ago. She widened her watery eyes and asked, how could you? Long time no see, Makoto. Kushina smiled and waved her hand to greet her, and said softly, I will explain the things here later, let's watch the show first. Going to the theater. Uchiha Makoto was a little confused at first, but then she realized that she could see and hear everything in the outside world. She felt as if she had become the possessed soul of that gentle boy, yet she was able to remain clearly herself. What a wonderful feeling. Hey, is this Sasuke? Makoto noticed her little son in black and said in surprise, he has grown so big. It's quite emotional, right? I was also surprised when I first saw Naruto. Kushina said with emotion. Have you met your son yet? No, it's hard to explain now that we meet. Yeah, that's true. The two ladies were chatting about their children in the soul orb. Sasuke, who walked into the cemetery, also noticed Yifeng and a look of surprise appeared on his face. Good evening, Sasuke-san. Yifeng greeted first and smiled slightly. Are you here to visit the graves? Sasuke was silent for a moment, then nodded. He looked towards where Yifeng was standing, frowned slightly and said, Zhaolin Yifeng, what are you doing here? He was a little confused. Why was this guy standing in front of his mother's tombstone? Of course Yifeng couldn't just say he was here to propose to your mother, so he deliberately changed the subject. I came to visit an old friend. An old friend. Sasuke looked at Yifeng, then turned his gaze to his mother's tombstone, an expression of disbelief and shock on his face. Could this guy's old friend be my mother? I grew up in an orphanage in Konoha when I was a child. Yifeng smiled gently and said, Mrs. Machen occasionally comes to our orphanage as a volunteer to teach younger children to read and write. She is a very patient and gentle teacher, but it's a pity. At the end, he sighed with regret. My mother actually did such a thing. Sasuke's expression was moved. He had no idea this had happened. Inside the soul young pearl, Kushina couldn't help but ask curiously, is what Yifeng said true? Did you also volunteer at the orphanage? That's true. Mrs. Makoto, who was wearing a black gauze dress, nodded first, then a puzzled expression appeared on her pretty face and she said, but I don't think I've ever seen this young man before. He used to have dead eyes, Kushina reminded. Ah. Mrs. Makoto finally reacted at this time and exclaimed, so Brother Yifeng is a little sheep. Little sheep. Kushina's face showed a curious and inquiring expression. When I was a kid, I never moved around with those kids. I always slept in the dormitory wrapped in a blanket. Yifeng sighed and explained, I don't know when Mrs. Makoto labeled me a little sheep. I even forgot my real name. Sheep also like to sleep all day, which is consistent with your image at that time. Mrs. Makoto's voice became more friendly, and she said, I didn't expect that you have changed so much now. I'm sorry that I didn't recognize you at the first time. If you had appeared a few days earlier, he wouldn't be like this. Kushina interrupted. Oh, that's a pity. Mrs. Makoto smiled and covered her mouth. The conversation between Yifeng and the two ladies echoed in his heart, but Sasuke in front of him couldn't hear it at all. The little hedgehog-headed boy was still recalling the little details of his past interactions with his mother, and suddenly a feeling of guilt came over him. Actually, he had always taken his mother's love for granted since he was a child, but he seldom cared about what his mother did every day, and never asked about her joys and sorrows. As a son, he felt that he had failed in this respect. Thank you for remembering my mother. Sasuke said this sincerely. No matter how vicious and disgusting the answer stars created by this guy in front of him are, at least he remembered to come and see it on his mother's death anniversary, which is the greatest respect for his mother. You're welcome. Yifeng smiled and said gently, if your mother knew that you are so filial, she would definitely be very happy. Sasuke wanted to say that he was not a filial child, but he swallowed the words back. Even if you have this relationship with my mother, I will not let you off in the grade competition. Of course. Yifeng nodded with a smile and said, your mother probably also wants to see all your abilities now. HMPH, you don't need to say such things. Sasuke snorted, and his Tsunere attribute was instantly activated. To be fair, I will also use my special move. Yifeng curled his lips, and the lenses on his face refracted silver light under the moonlight. Sasuke, please be ready. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. A special trick. Sasuke stared at the other person's back with an expression as if he was facing a great enemy. Damn, is this guy really going to use that? Can his secret equipment really stop it? Even if Granny Cat has promised him in person, what if there is any omission? Sense of crisis. A strong sense of crisis arose in Sasuke's heart. This kid probably won't be able to sleep when he goes home tonight. Kushina said with a gloating smile. Why? Mrs. Makoto asked curiously. From Sasuke-kun's perspective, The little sheep's special move is called the reply Starry Sky. Kushina smiled evilly and said, who wouldn't be scared after hearing this? Answer, defend. Mrs. Makoto's eyes widened and she gasped. Yi Feng, is this true? It's fake. Yi Feng's mouth twitched, and he said, who would really fail the defense? It's hard to say. What if a curse suddenly comes at that time? Kushina muttered. Curse. Mrs. Makoto looked stunned. I beg you, sister. Yi Feng frowned and said, can you please stop talking to me, you crow mouth? The night is getting darker and the stars are dotted. I see. In Konoha's underground base, Mrs. Makoto, who was dressed in a black dress, nodded in realization and said, I was just curious about why the proposal came out of nowhere. It turns out that Yi Feng-kun is cursed. It's hard to say actually. Kushina whispered. Huh. Mrs. Makoto looked confused. I suspect this guy is obsessed with wives. Kushina leaned close to her ear and said, he just spoke his true feelings under the instigation of the curse. Is that really the case? Mrs. Makoto looked surprised. Hey, I heard everything. Yi Feng turned his eyes away from the culture container in front of him and turned to the two ladies who were standing beside him pretending to whisper. Ms. Makoto, you don't really believe it, do you? Huh. Uchiha Makoto blinked when she was called, and turned her eyes away guiltily. No, how could that be possible? Yi Feng's face suddenly turned dark, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch as he said, since you didn't believe me, why didn't you look at me when you spoke? Ha 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 ha. Kushina laughed out loud as she found it very interesting. Makoto really doesn't dare to watch, for fear that she will be eaten alive by a little sheep like you. Yi Feng didn't want to talk anymore and turned his gaze back to the culture container in front of him. It seems to have grown a lot. What did you just do? Kushina stopped joking at this time, and her attention was attracted by the white substance in the culture container. Compared to a few hours ago, its appearance was more concrete. Previously it was just an abstract mass of goo, but now its hardened outline could be seen. It's chakra. I added a tributalis chakra energy into it. Yi Feng did not hide it and said frankly, I didn't expect it to be assimilated so well. It seems that the saying that chakra energy and soul are of the same nature is correct. So, it's completed now? Kushina asked again. There's still a long way to go. Yi Feng shook his head, showing a meaningful smile on his face and said, but there's no need to add any more theoretical questions. I hope our volunteer is ready. Volunteer. Mrs. Makoto felt confused as she listened to the interaction between the two. They are human test subjects, Kushina explained. Human experimentation. Isn't that a bit bad? Don't worry, Elder Danzo will definitely cooperate with us. Elder Danzo. Late at night. Danzo, who was about to go to bed, received an urgent message from Gray Feather of the Land of Waves. Open black lens bracket Master Danzo. Close black lens bracket. My subordinate accidentally discovered a major secret at the Umbrella Corporation in Wave Country. The top executives of the Umbrella Corporation, led by Hanzo Salamander, are actually conducting underground human experiments, injecting some special energy into the ninja's body to stimulate its special body activity. The injected ninja will gain extremely powerful and terrifying strength, speed and chakra amplification in a short period of time, so the Umbrella Corporation calls it the Super Ninja Project. However, after this process, the experimental subject will most likely evolve into an inhuman monster. I am deeply uneasy. Attached here is the material evidence of the special energy created by the Umbrella Corporation. In order to prevent the entire ninja world from suffering, please ask the Hokage to apply for an order to conquer the Land of Waves. Open black lens bracket greetings from Wei Yu. Close black lens bracket. After reading the letter, Danzo frowned deeply, and looked at the milky white liquid sealed in the test tube, with a thoughtful look on his face. The autumn morning was filled with wisps of mist, and the entire leaf seemed to be covered with a layer of transparent gauze. At the gate of the ninja school, Yi Feng, Naruto and Shikamaru met here. Good morning, Naruto-kun and Shikamaru-kun. Yi Feng, I'm not used to your literary style now. Naruto frowned and said sarcastically, the old style is better. Okay, Ming-er. Yi Feng nodded and changed the name. He looked at Shikamaru and called out again. Lure. Damn it, you're taking advantage of me, aren't you? Naruto immediately twitched his lips in dissatisfaction. If you're not afraid of being beaten to death by my mother if she hears you one day, I don't care. Shikamaru said calmly, resting his hands behind his head. Hey, Yi Feng. Naruto quietly patted his friend's shoulder and took out a black plastic bag from his pocket. I'll give you a great gift. When the senior competition comes, you must beat that sissy Sasuke. Thank you, but it's not necessary. Yi Feng took 2 steps back. He could already smell the faint stench coming from the black plastic bag. Why are you hiding? I shoveled it for you on the street. Naruto insisted, carrying the plastic bag and moving forward. It's still fresh. Naruto, throw it away. Shikamaru couldn't help but cover his nose and shouted, how could you think of putting it in your pocket? I have learned a new trick, Naruto. Yi Feng made a pause gesture and advised kindly, that trick has been sealed and can no longer be used. Put it down quickly, or your mother will really go crazy if she is still alive. A new trick. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Yes, a new trick. Yi Feng gave an affirmative answer. Okay then. Naruto chose to trust his friend and threw the big bag of dog poop that he had collected with great effort into the trash can at the door. Call. Yi Feng breathed a sigh of relief and took Naruto to the school bathroom. He watched him wash his hands several times before returning to the classroom with him. What? You're just like an old woman. Naruto looked at his hands that were almost peeling from rubbing, and said with a dissatisfied expression. Is it possible that this is what your mother wants you to do? Yi Feng sighed. Tisk, that stinky guy is coming. Naruto looked at a certain hedgehog-haired boy and immediately gnashed his teeth. He actually looked at us, he was provoking us. Yi Feng, what are you doing? He saw that his good friend actually greeted the other party with a smile, and that arrogant Sasuke actually nodded to Yi Feng for the first time. What's going on? How could these two be together? Well, say hello to Sasuke. Yi Feng said frankly. You actually said hello to that arrogant guy. At this moment, Naruto felt as if he was being brilliant. You know I hate him. Actually, my classmate is a nice person. Yi Feng patted his shoulder and sighed, I think you can put aside your prejudices and try to get along peacefully. Impossible. Naruto flatly refused, saying, I will beat this arrogant guy until he has a black eye. To avenge last time, right? Shikamaru rolled his eyes. Shut up. Whose side are you on? Naruto's defense was instantly broken. Yi Feng ignored the noisy little yellow-haired boy, closed his eyes and began to ponder the arrangement of hand seals for ninjutsu. For him, there is no point in studying any ninjutsu that requires hand seals. Only the ninjutsu without hand seals can show some research value. Kushina, your child is really lively. The 2 good girlfriends in the Yunlingzu were not idle and started chatting among themselves. What do you mean by lively? He's just being silly. Kushina sighed and said, you don't know, when I see him licking my boots like a dog, sometimes I really want to rush out and punch him. You're still young, and sometimes you do things that make people laugh and cry. Mrs. Makoto tried to comfort her softly, saying, come to think of it, which girl is so outstanding that your son would like her? Look, she's the pink-haired girl sitting in front of the scooter. Kushina didn't hide it and spread her hands. Her name is Haruno Sakura. She's your future daughter-in-law. Mrs. Makoto was stunned, her expression slightly dull. Her best friend's son has fallen in love with her future daughter-in-law. How should she comment on this situation? After thinking for a moment, he decided to skip this topic. What about Naruto's future wife? Aren't you going to let Yi Fengjun bring them together? Unfortunately, the girl likes Yi Feng now. Kushina's face was as gloomy as water. Stiff. Mrs. Makoto was completely frozen, the corners of her mouth twitching slightly, and she was completely silent. But it doesn't matter. Let young people solve their emotional problems by themselves. Kushina smiled generously and said, now I have the opportunity to see Naruto grow up with my own eyes. I am already very satisfied. That's true. Uchiha Makoto nodded with empathy. Time passed and it was time to go home from school. Hey, we still have time to go eat ramen today, right? Naruto grabbed his sleeve and yelled, "Don't tell me you're going to meet your blind date." No problem. Yi Feng nodded and agreed. But just as they reached the school gate, a root member wearing a silver gray vest and a monkey face mask blocked their way. Shaolin Yifeng, follow me. The root member gave orders in an indifferent tone and in a condescending manner. Okay. Yi Feng took the lead to stop Naruto, who was furious and wanted to ask for an explanation, and apologized to him. He turned around and followed this root member to another street. Damn, who is that arrogant guy? Naruto couldn't stand such an existence the most. Forget it, Naruto. Shikamaru grabbed his arm and sighed, you can't mess with those people. Because Shikamaru's father works in the general staff, he knows about the existence of the root. This group of people is the dark side hidden deep within the village. Even his father had an expression that said, I don't want to have anything to do with it, when he talked about this organization. But Shikamaru is now very curious, why Yifeng is related to them. What is this guy doing secretly? Root tissue base. Danzo, with his head and face wrapped in gauze, sat at the top with his eyelids drooping. Master Danzo. Yi Feng, who came in from outside, bowed to him respectfully and said, why do you want to summon me? Shaolin Yifeng, I plan to arrange a formal position for you in the root. Danzo said expressionlessly, but before that, there is a small problem that you need to solve. Please give me your instructions, Lord Danzo. Yi Feng pretended to be a little excited. Danzo was very pleased with his attitude. Although this child may have some mental defects, at least it can be seen that he has a strong sense of identification with his roots. Shaolin Yifeng, how do you think we should treat Konoha's traitors? All traitors should be killed. Yi Feng spoke without hesitation and in a firm voice. What if this traitor is an acquaintance of yours? Crime +1. Good. Danzo clapped his hands and laughed, saying, after my investigation, I found that Wei Yu stationed in Wave Country has rebelled. Shaolin Yifeng, you know what to do, right? I will bring her head back as soon as possible and present it to Lord Danzo. Yi Feng made the promise without asking anything. Danzo nodded with satisfaction and waved his hand, saying, there's no need to be so anxious. Just wait until your school's grade competition is over. Yes, Lord Danzo. Darken the base of root tissue. Yifeng had already said goodbye and left. Danzo sat on the podium with one hand supporting his cheek, facing the empty hall. His eyelids were still drooping, and the dim light illuminated the lines and grooves on his face. The shadow dancing behind him was like a demon with bared fangs and claws, making people feel cold all over. Danzo suddenly spoke, his lips parting. Yes. A man wearing a monkey face mask walked out from the shadows behind Danzo. The man had medium-length hair and a tall and handsome appearance. The ninja school's grade competition is over, and you and Kobayashi Yifeng will go to the land of waves together. Danzo said lightly. Yes, Lord Danzo. The man codenamed Chen knelt on one knee and said respectfully. What's the current situation in the laboratory? Danzo asked softly. Your prediction is correct. Chen lowered his head and reported, ninjas of different levels can withstand the erosion of that energy for different periods of time. Among the 6 individuals, there is still one Jonin who has not completely lost his mind. Very good. Danzo nodded with satisfaction and said with emotion, I thought that old guy Hanzo had lost his ambition, but I didn't expect that I underestimated him. He actually came up with such an incredible thing in his twilight years. In this respect, I am indeed not as good as him. But Lord Danzo has enough luck. Chen praised. Yes, you are right. Danzo chuckled and said, I am lucky enough to catch him in the act. In addition to urging Shaolin Yifeng to kill Wei Yu, you should know that you have another mission when you go to Wave Country this time, right? Strive for more special energy substances from Salamander Hanzo. Chen nodded respectfully. It seems that you don't need my advice anymore. Danzo slowly stood up and looked straight ahead, his eyes revealing a light called ambition. Once I have completely completed the enhancement of the Super Ninja, the position of Hokage will be within my grasp. An underground base beneath Konoha. What do you think, sister? Yifeng smiled and said, I said that Danzo-sama would not choose to attack the Umbrella Corporation. Your worries are completely groundless. The urgent message in Danzo's hand was handed over to Ms. Weiyu by Yifeng, who then delivered it to Danzo through her own channels. When she wrote the message, Kushina was very worried and felt that Yifeng was playing with fire. If Danzo really follows the advice in the message and reports the actions of the Umbrella Corporation to Sarutobi Hiruzen, it will most likely provoke disputes or even war. This would obviously destroy the hard-earned development prospects of the Wave Country. But the reality was completely different from what Kushina was worried about, making the young lady doubt her life. I really can't understand it. Is this Danzo crazy? It's okay that he didn't take action against the Umbrella, but he actually planned to get rid of his loyal subordinates. Ms. Weiyu is not only a spy for the Root organization, but also a secret agent for Konoha. Yifeng smiled and explained softly, if she accidentally lets it slip and tells the Hokage about this, how will Danzo's dream of becoming a Hokage continue? Haiyu has already turned to the land of waves, but Danzo definitely doesn't know about it. However, Danzo still ordered Yifeng to execute Weiyu on the grounds of being a traitor, which was obviously for the purpose of keeping secrets. Just for such a ridiculous reason. Kushina looked surprised. Yes, it's for this ridiculous reason. Yifeng shook his head and sighed, it was actually almost the same when Uchiha Shisui was forced to death. When Shisui died, most people in the clan thought Itachi was responsible. Mrs. Makoto sighed and said, even Fugaku thought so. The tragedy of the Uchiha clan stems from many factors. Yifeng sat on the office chair, tapping his fingers on the armrest and said, the distrust in the village, the arrogance of the radicals, and the inability of your husband as the clan leader. Yifeng had already been conservative in what he said, using only the word, powerless, to describe it. But in fact, Uchiha Makoto knew very well that her husband always showed indecision and hesitation when dealing with conflicts between the Uchiha and the village. He was unwilling to deal with the radicals within the tribe, but also did not want to become completely hostile to the village. This wavering attitude also became one of the root causes of the Uchiha's destruction. Of course, there is actually another very important factor here, which is the lack of education for his children by Fugaku, as the head of the family. Uchiha Itachi's values were shaped by Shisui. As he interacted with Shisui, his inner balance gradually leaned more towards the village. Yifeng did not reveal this truth to Mrs. Makoto, after all, the dead are the greatest. Uchiha Fugaku has already paid for his mistakes with his life, and there is no point in continuing to plot against him. Let's stop with the sentimental topic. Yifeng, who was sitting on the office chair, clapped his hands and smiled slightly. Let's show the two ladies something interesting. Under the confused looks of Makoto and Kushina, Yifeng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Click. The air in front of him seemed to be torn apart, revealing a huge black hole. This is. Mrs. Makoto was surprised. Black cavity. Kushina had Yifeng's memories of the god of death transmitted to her, so she recognized the nature of this black cavity at a glance. When did you research this? It's not research. Yifeng smiled and explained. The black cavity technology has always been in my mind, but I couldn't show it at the beginning. The space ratios of the ninja world and the death god world are different, so the parameters need to be readjusted. With this, it will be much more convenient to go out in the future. Kushina looked into the black cavity curiously, and saw only darkness. Would I be honored enough to invite the two ladies to come and experience the feeling of traveling through space with me? Yifeng asked gently. Kushina and Makoto looked at each other, then turned into light and entered Yifeng's body. Standing up, Yifeng raised his foot and stepped into the black hole. The black cavity closed again, and the torn space returned to its original state. Wave Kingdom Square. After a tiring day, Zabuza, Haku, Kurochu Raiga, Zanghua, and Maruyama passed by carrying hose. Looking at the huge statue standing in the center of the square, Kurochu Raiga joked, "Oh, we see the great hero of our wave country again. Shut up, big-breasted girl. Zabuza said sarcastically with a dark face. You bastard. Black Chu Lei Ya's huge chest rose and fell, and he gritted his teeth and said, how many times have I told you not to use this word to describe me again? Uncle Lei Ya. Zhang Hua, who was standing at the side, rubbed his hands and said hesitantly, can I work for 2 hours so that you can let me experience the feel of it? What the hell? He Chu Lei Ya's face turned green, and he looked at him with hatred and horror. I'm a man, how could you do this to me? Ha 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 ha. Zabuza laughed happily, grinning and said, 2 working hours, Master Raiga. Are you really not going to consider it? Black Chu Lei Ya gritted his teeth and said directly through the defense, I'll consider your father. Click. A black space crack slowly opened in the center of the square, and Yi Feng, dressed in white, walked out. He looked at He Chu Lei Ya and the others, and smiled slightly, long time no see, fellow prisoners. The atmosphere in the central square of Wave Country fell into silence. Zabuza and the others did not say a word, obviously they were deeply shocked by Yi Feng's weird appearance. As ninjas, they knew that there were space-time ninjutsu in this world. The fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze, who was famous in the ninja world at that time, relied on his space-time ninjutsu called Flying Thunder God to dominate the ninja world. But seriously speaking, Flying Thunder God was only performing short-distance space teleportation through coordinates, while the freak boy in front of them was actually tearing the space apart right in front of them. This doesn't look like ninjutsu at all, it's more like a miracle. Lord Yi Feng. Bai was the first to react among the group of people. He bowed and greeted Yi Feng. No need to use honorifics, Bai. Yi Feng smiled slightly and said gently, have you reported to the school in Wave Country recently? Every child of school age must receive compulsory education in school. This is the first decree issued by Yi Feng after becoming the leader of the Wave Kingdom. In his eyes, education is the top priority. The lack of quality education is a big reason why the ninja world has experienced so many years of turmoil and war. Konoha's current ninja school is a 6-year system, which is equivalent to Yi Feng's elementary school graduation in his previous life. This is still a product of peacetime improvements, and the ninja schools during wartime were even more exaggerated. On average, it took 3 years to graduate, and those so-called geniuses went to participate in the war after less than a year of study. It is no wonder that such a distorted education model has produced a large number of so-called peace elites. Killing everyone in the ninja world for the sake of peace is nothing wrong in their eyes. If all the people are gone, then there will be peace, right? This. Bai lowered his head timidly, not daring to answer. Actually, the boy in front of him was much younger than him. But Bai felt that the boy's figure was so tall that he was afraid to look directly at him. It seems that there is no more. Yi Feng's smile remained unchanged, and he said lightly, since you are unwilling to abide by our basic policies, please leave the Kingdom of Waves as soon as possible. I'm sorry, Shiro apologized quickly, saying softly, I just wanted to be with Zabuza-sama. Bai, you will start going to school tomorrow. Zabuza suddenly said. Zabuza-sama. Shiro looked confused. From today on, I no longer need you as a tool. Zabuza turned his face to the side and said coldly. After what he had seen and heard in the Land of Waves over the past few days, he had a rough idea of what the young leader in front of him was planning to do. He wanted to build this dilapidated and dirty border island into an ideal country, but Zabuza felt that he was a little too naive. So naive that he wanted to laugh. But deep down, Zabuza admired such people. If Bai could stay here and integrate into the country governed by this guy, it would be a good outcome. Indeed, Mr. Zabuza now has a hoe in his hand. Yi Feng's black eyes looked at Bai through the glass lenses, and said in a flat voice, if you still want to stay in the Land of Waves and see him often, then the only way is to go to school. Yes, I understand. Bai finally compromised and responded with mixed feelings. You have been working here for a few days. Have you encountered any difficult problems? Yi Feng asked with a smile. The biggest trouble is that you want us to reclaim the barren mountains. He Chu Lei-ya muttered in a low voice. Uncle Lei-ya, shut up. Zhang Hua pulled his sleeve. I am telling the truth. He Chu Lei-ya was obviously a little intimidated by the young man in front of him, but he couldn't help but say, there are 2 peaks in that barren mountain. Even if our chakra is not restricted, we can't flatten it even if we work until we die of exhaustion. I see. I didn't think it through. Yi Feng was not angry. Instead, he nodded in agreement and said, to express my apology, leave the 2 mountains to me. Leave it to you. He Chu Lei-ya was stunned, his expression stunned. Not only him, but Zabuza, Zhanghua, Maruyama and Haku also showed surprised and puzzled expressions. Are they those 2? Yi Feng looked far away at the hilltops standing in the southern suburbs of Wave Country. He stretched out his right hand, and a ball of orange-red fire condensed in his palm. Raise your hand and throw it upwards gently. The fireball shot straight into the sky, reached a certain height, and then fell rapidly towards the top of the mountain. It was visible to the naked eye that the diameter of the fireball began to expand wildly as if it was inflated. The light it shone from became more and more dazzling, and in the end it looked like a sun falling to the ground. Boom! There was a huge explosion and a mushroom cloud rose. The powerful wind waves swept away the clouds in the entire area, and smoke and dust filled the sky. After a while, the smoke and dust dissipated. In the horrified sight of He Chu Lei-ya and others, the entire mountain had disappeared without a trace. That's all. Everyone keep working hard. Yi Feng had a gentle expression on his face. He smiled at the dazed people in front of him and turned away. Even after he disappeared, He Chu Lei-ya and the others who stayed there still hadn't come back to their senses. Their eyes were wide open, and their mouths were so wide open that they seemed to be able to fit a big duck egg. The Umbrella Corporation's offices. Yukushi Nono and a young man with silver-gray hair stood side by the window, staring at the disappearing mountain in the southern suburbs with shock on their faces. It was not until Yi Feng knocked gently on the door that the 2 gradually came back to their senses. It's really surprising. The young man with silver-gray hair turned to look at Yi Feng and exclaimed, is this the result of your super ninja plan? No, it's just the application of ninjutsu. Yi Feng smiled and shook his head, and said softly, Kabuto. That's right. The young man with silver-gray hair is Yi Feng's good brother, Kabuto Yukushi, the #1 henchman valued by Orochimaru. You don't even call me brother. Do pushed his glasses on the bridge of his nose and said with a smile, like you said before, at least let me feel a little involved, right? Is there any necessary connection between the title and sense of participation? Yi Feng asked. If you are the eldest brother who is the top figure in the ninja world, then I can be considered at least half of the top figure in the ninja world. Kabuto Yukushi explained. What you said makes sense, but I refuse. Yi Feng's lips curled slightly. It's really sad. Yao Shido covered his chest and pretended to be very upset and said, I brought the research instruments you needed. Oh, isn't it normal for the elder brother to take care of the younger brother? Yi Feng asked back. As expected of you, you ungrateful little brother. Yukushi Kabuto sighed and said helplessly, as for the corpses you asked me to find for you, they are not so complete. Some of them need to go deep into the hinterland of the major ninja villages. I am not like you, the top ninja world, who can flatten a mountain with ease. Thank you, this is already a great help. Yi Feng's mouth curled up and he said with a smile, Brother Do. Oh my, it's really hard to hear you call me brother. Although he said so, it was obvious from the expression on Do's face that he was very happy to be called brother. What should we do next? Please bring a copy of our super ninja plan to Orochimaru Senpai when you return. Yi Feng showed a malicious smile on his face and said, we need to treat everyone equally. We can't let Elder Danzo take all the credit. Our senior Orochimaru is obviously also a very good experimental material. A few days later, in Konoha's underground base, Yi Feng was sitting in the laboratory, performing final adjustments on the laptop-like device in front of him. This is the network terminal he created by combining Aizen's scientific research ability. It functions like a signal receiving station, and after completion, it can transmit long-distance communications. In the ninja world, this is definitely a groundbreaking advancement. At least, there are no communication devices such as computers and smartphones in the ninja world today. Outside his laboratory is a spacious hall that has been renovated. At the front is a row of monitors that look like small televisions, from which one can clearly see all the public areas of Konoha. 2 huge metal doors were erected behind the monitor, and rows of culture containers were neatly arranged inside the doors. Some of these containers are empty, while others are occupied. After walking out of the Seoul Yunju, Mrs. Kushina and Mrs. Makoto stood in front of 2 occupied containers respectively, looking at the familiar faces inside with emotion. The person in front of Kushina was Nohara Rin, one of the students of the 4th Hokage and the beloved of Obito, who was eventually summoned by Yifeng through the Impure World reincarnation. On Mrs. Makoto's side is Uchiha Shisui, Konoha's former genius. This person's body was more difficult to find, but fortunately, hard work paid off. Yifeng finally found it north of the Nanhei River, close to the border of the grass country. At that time, Shisui's corpse was lying under the roots of a tree along the shore, with only a rusty Konoha forehead guard and a few rotten pieces of cloth to keep it company. Unlike Kushina and Makoto, Shisui, Nohara Rin, and the other occupants of these containers are not in a complete soul state. They are summoned by the orthodox reincarnation, wearing the clothes they wore before their death, and their cheeks and parts of their bodies are covered with white bone. Blurred. Their current state is truly becoming virtual. But as Yifeng said before, this technology is not yet fully mature. Therefore, these, etherealization impure earth, can only fall into a sleeping state most of the time, waiting for the etherealization to be completely completed before starting the next step. Shisui is a special case. Thanks to his strong will, he managed to stay awake most of the time during the days he was summoned. Through communication with the former clan leader's wife, he has understood everything that happened after his death and the current situation. Once again, I'm sorry for what happened to you in the Uchiha clan, Lady Makoto. Even though he was in the culture container, Shisui was able to speak and communicate, and said apologetically, I really didn't expect Itachi to do this. I've already told you that you don't have to apologize, Shisui. Uchiha Makoto shook her head and said calmly, at least you have made sacrifices and efforts for the peace of the Uchiha and the village. It's just that when things develop to that point, the extermination of the clan has become an inevitable outcome. Is this the inevitable ending? Shisui thought about these words and couldn't help but sigh deeply. The ending is inevitable, but it doesn't mean that all Uchiha deserve to die. Uchiha Makoto gathered her hair and whispered, what did those old and young women and children, and the hand-burned uncle selling pancakes do wrong? So, Mrs. Makoto is planning to seek revenge on Konoha's high-ranking officials and Itachi. Shisui asked with a complicated expression. If that's the case, he can only ask for death. He would not persuade Lady Makoto in front of him to let go of her hatred, nor would he help her to attack Konoha and his friends. Faced with this dilemma, he would rather choose to commit suicide. What revenge? Red-haired Kushina floated over from Nohara Rin's side and said with blinking eyes, everything we are doing now is just to prevent the tragedy of Uchiha from happening again. Looking at the 4th Hokage's wife who was holding Mrs. Makoto's shoulders, Shisui took a breath and said, you said you don't want the tragedy to happen again. To what extent do you plan to do this? If the 4th Hokage were still alive, would he support your current actions? Kushina did not answer his question, but slowly said, do you know how many workers are needed to work together with blowers to make 5 kilograms of steel? Shisui was stunned for a moment, then shook his head slightly. Of course he didn't know and never investigated. Kushina stretched out her hands to indicate the number and said calmly, these 24 workers need to work non-stop for 2 hours to produce 5 kilograms of steel. But if a ninja who is proficient in fire escape does this job, do you know how long it will take? Shisui was silent for a moment, then shook his head again. 47 seconds. Kushina smiled and said meaningfully, if these steel workers learn fire ninjutsu, and the farmers learn earth ninjutsu and water ninjutsu, will there still be wars caused by material shortages in the ninja world? Shisui's eyes widened in shock. He roughly understood why the fourth Hokage's wife gave such an example, and finally knew their true goals and ideals. Peace in the ninja world. This is not some kind of empty idealism, but a path that can actually be implemented. Excited. Even though his body was immersed in nutrient solution, Shisui's expression became extremely excited. There is actually such a method to achieve peace. Why haven't other people in the inner ninja world, including myself, thought of it? It's not that we didn't expect it, Shisui-kun. Kushina seemed to see through his thoughts and said with emotion, "It is our education and way of thinking that limit our cognition. I once told you that Chief Yifeng is the future of the ninja world. Do you understand now?" Shisui nodded in a daze. With such vision and cognition, as well as sufficient motivation and ability, it is no exaggeration to say that this boy is the future of the ninja world. We welcome you to join us, Shisui-kun. Kushina nodded with satisfaction and said, "But now you still need to study hard to contribute to the new world." "I will." Shisui now felt that the whole world was a little more lively than before. Of course, learning this kind of thing also needs to be done step by step. Kushina touched her chin and said lightly, "Beginners should not touch advanced theories first. It is better to start with the simplest ones." "What do you recommend, Kushina-sama?" Shisui asked tentatively. "You have just started to enter the threshold, and you must first break the inherent cognition." Kushina blinked and pretended to speak casually. "It just so happens that I have a simple and easy to understand work here that meets your current conditions." As he spoke, he raised his hand and pressed the button next to the culture container. Although Kushina is still in the state of a soul, she has generated spirit particles in her body and can touch and interact with physical objects. Click. A very strange small rectangular TV was spread out in front of Shisui, and a picture gradually formed on the screen. "Next up for you, magical girl Uchiha Madara. See you in the picture." This time, Kushina showed her true colors. It was obvious that everything she said before was just a prelude. This scheming lady had completely learned to be a bad person. Looking at the images that began to flow before his eyes, a big question mark popped up in Shisui's head and he stood there in a daze. "Come on, Shisui-kun." With the ultimate goal achieved, Kushina took Mrs. Makoto's hand and ran away on the spot. After reading it, you will find the door to a new world. Squeak. The laboratory door opens. "Why, you don't want to continue accompanying your little disciple?" Yifeng knew it was Kushina who came in without turning around, and asked softly. "It's so boring. She's not awake yet." Kushina sat down on the research table where he was working, propped up her chin with one hand and said, "How's the situation here? Have you built that network?" "It's almost done." Yifeng nodded and said, "Just set up the terminal server. I don't think you need to work so hard. You've done a good job." Kushina stared at the boy in front of her and said seriously, "Isn't it good to relax occasionally in your free time?" "Where is Mrs. Makoto?" Yifeng raised his head without stopping his hands. "I'm reading the textbooks you wrote." Kushina was a little dissatisfied with his change of subject, and glanced to the side and said, "Everyone wants to keep up with you, even Makoto is like this now." Yifeng didn't say anything else, but just silently reassembled the parts in front of him. Drop. A soft sound. The devices on the research table lit up green lights one after another, and the laptop screen began to flicker, eventually presenting a clear picture. "Hey, I got it." Karen's excited voice came from the other side, and her little red head appeared in front of Yifeng. "I can really see it, the leader is so awesome. You should get out of the way, Karen." Mrs. Rina's voice sounded behind Karen, saying, "Now is the technical testing stage, let Nono-sensei take the position." "Oh." Karen's tone was obviously a little reluctant, but at least she knew the seriousness of the matter. The bespectacled pharmacist Nono appeared on the screen, smiling brightly and waving at Yifeng. "Congratulations, Chief. Your research has been successful. Please allow me to express my sincere respect to you on behalf of the people of Wave Country." "It was just luck." Yifeng smiled and glanced at Mrs. Kushina who was staring at the screen curiously. Because of the angle, Nono and others on the other side of the screen couldn't see her. Now the leader can issue commands remotely. It's really convenient. Nono exclaimed. Do has gone back, right? Yifeng asked. Well, I took away 2 tubes of the virtual substance you researched. Nono nodded. 2 tubes. Yifeng raised his eyebrows. This was different from what we had agreed. Could it be that Kabuto is planning to inject himself first to gain Orochimaru's trust? Yifeng had already made it clear to him before that whatever was handed over to Danzo or Orochimaru were all inferior products, just to obtain experimental parameters from them. Since it is a low-quality product, it must have major defects. If you just foolishly inject it into your body, there is a high probability that something will go wrong. However, given Do's personality, even if Yifeng had reminded him, the other party probably wouldn't care much. Because he was raised as a spy, Do often puts his self aside. As long as he can accomplish what Yifeng wants him to do, Do doesn't care about the slightest danger. Fortunately, Yifeng had anticipated that such a situation might occur and took out insurance in advance. Has anyone come from Akatsuki? Yifeng asked again. I was just about to report this to you. Nono smiled and said, they have already sent the remains of Hanzo the salamander here. What should we do with them? Let Ms. Weiyu perform the impure world reincarnation on him first and explain the situation to see how he reacts. Yifeng subconsciously wanted to knock on the table with his fingers, but accidentally hit Kushina's thigh. The sense of reality is not as strong as real flesh, but at least you can feel some elasticity. Looking at the angry look of the red-haired lady beside him, Yifeng smiled awkwardly. Okay, I understand. Nono, who was on the other side of the screen, obviously didn't notice the episode and nodded slightly. It's getting late, leader, go to bed early. You too, Mr. Nono. Yifeng finished speaking and the communication was closed. As the research here finished for now. Kushina stared at him with her beautiful black eyes and said lightly, don't stay up late anymore, go to bed quickly. Okay, mother. Yifeng sighed. As expected, a sister-brother relationship can't satisfy your fetish, right? Kushina smiled sarcastically, and said meaningfully, it's okay, mom will accommodate you. Yifeng's mouth twitched and he was about to retort when a golden options interface suddenly appeared. Open black lens bracket choose. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket 1. Throw her down and let her know who her daddy is, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket 2. Ask her, Mom, I want a hug, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket 3. Snuggle into your mother's arms and tell her it's time to breastfeed, close black lens bracket. Okay, this is how you play, right? Yifeng was so angry that the glasses on his face almost broke. He gritted his teeth, lowered his head and said intermittently, Mom. I want a hug of love. Silence. The entire laboratory suddenly fell into silence. Kushina obviously didn't expect that the boy in front of her would actually dare to call her mom, and her face was full of stunned expression. Open black lens bracket. Congratulations on getting the portable space. Close black lens bracket. The reward prompt popped up, but Yifeng was no longer in the mood to study it. He stood up and prepared to flee from here. So awkward. Even though he was forced by the system to say this, he still felt ashamed to face others. But at this moment, Kushina suddenly reached out and pushed his shoulder. The force was not strong, but it made Yifeng sit back on the chair. Was that a curse just now? Kushina asked. Yeah. Yifeng nodded. Then do you want to? Kushina's voice was very gentle, but the words she said made Yifeng's expression startled. What? Don't pretend, I'm asking you if you want to. Kushina stretched out her index finger and pointed it in front of Yifeng's eyes, and said with a curved mouth, you only have one chance to tell the truth now. This cunning woman is teasing me on purpose. Yifeng's first reaction was to get up and leave. How could such a crude temptation trap a man with a heart of steel like me? What a joke. Yifeng's mouth curved into a cold smile, and he said lightly, I want to. Hee, you're exposed. Kushina laughed heartily, and pointed her white finger at the tip of Yifeng's nose, and whispered, I told you that you were using the curse as a cover to hide your special fetish. Now I've caught you, right? Unable to refute, Yifeng hung his head and fell silent. It was his own fault to fall into the trap, there was nothing much to say. One's heart could not be deceived, and one's thoughts were just thoughts. Yifeng had already completely laid down, intending to allow Kushina to mock him as she approached him without refutation. Unexpected. Kushina actually had no intention of continuing to taunt him, instead she threw her arms around his neck and held him in a hug. The red-haired lady's body has no temperature and does not feel as soft as that of humans. But even so, Yifeng's heart beat violently, and he instinctively stretched out his arms to hug her waist. The two maintained this posture for a long time before gradually letting go. The ambiguous atmosphere did not dissipate even after the two of them separated, but instead seemed to intensify. The two looked at each other, and saw their own reflections in each other's eyes. The distance between them gradually narrowed, and it seemed that the corners of their lips were about to touch. There was a sound of something heavy falling to the ground. Looking towards the source of the sound, I saw Mrs. Makoto, who was wearing a black dress, standing at the door with one hand covering her mouth. At her feet was a white book with the words, "Magical Girl Uchiha Madara," written on the cover. "Sorry, am I interrupting you?" The night was dark. The stars in the sky are shining like bright gems hanging on a black curtain. Kushina, dressed in a snow-white dress, sat cross-legged by the river, looking up at the stars in the sky with a relaxed smile on her face. Mrs. Makoto, wearing a black dress, stood on her left, with an expression that seemed to be hesitant to speak. "Do you think Yifeng is asleep now?" Kushina suddenly spoke, breaking the silent atmosphere. Mrs. Makoto was silent for a moment, then whispered, "He should be asleep." "I guess he hasn't yet." Kushina smiled slightly and said softly, "That little bastard has been working day and night lately. Every day he is either researching the seal-free version of ninjutsu or developing new technology. He is completely different from when I first met him." Mrs. Makoto listened quietly without saying a word. "He used to have those dead eyes and looked careless every day." Recalling Yifeng's image when she first met him, Kushina couldn't help but chuckle and said, "Except for his two good brothers, Shikamaru and Naruto, he doesn't care about anyone else. His favorite things to do are sleeping and slacking off. He is the image of the little lamb in your previous impression. But now, he has changed a lot. Maybe he has found his ideal." Mrs. Makoto guessed. "Have you found your ideal?" Kushina shook her head and said calmly, "That word is not quite appropriate. His ideal has always been in his heart, but he just didn't have the ability to realize it at that time. His lazy and muddled appearance was just a disguise. It's painful to be sober alone. Knowing the right path but being unable to change it is a tormenting feeling. That's why he numbs himself and disguises himself as a lazy little sheep." "Is that so?" Mrs. Makoto nodded in sudden realization. "It wouldn't be like that if he described it." Kushina curled her lips and smiled. "This little bastard is very good at hiding his inner thoughts and his strange little habits." "You like your good brother's mother, right?" Mrs. Makoto said half-jokingly. "Yes, I wonder what his good brother's expression will be when he finds out." Kushina smiled and said, "But with Naruto's stupid personality, he probably won't care too much." "What about Minato?" Mrs. Makoto's tone suddenly became sharp. "You will want to kill Yifeng." Kushina was silent for a long time, and then said softly, "But Makoto, what do you think we are now? A continuation of death or a new life?" Mrs. Makoto thought for a moment and said, "It should be the former now. If the body can be resurrected, it will be the latter. I think given our current situation, as long as we want to continue living in this world, it's the latter." Kushina looked up at the sky again, and said in an ethereal voice, "Since we have been reborn, there is no need to dwell too much on the past, right? So, you are really serious about this?" Mrs. Makoto looked complicated and sighed, "You are right, there is no need for us to dwell on the past. But at least, you have to wait until he grows up, right? What's this now? You mock Yifeng for liking his good brother's mother every day, but you are the one who is acting like a shotacon. In terms of the degree of perversion, the latter is obviously worse. We haven't reached that point yet. Besides, that little bastard isn't a real child. Kushina turned her head away and blinked, an adult's soul, a child's body. It's not like you haven't seen it before. Mrs. Makoto suddenly stopped talking and fell into an eerie silence. She and Kushina had both seen Yi Feng's soul leaving his body during the experiment, also a version in which he was not wearing clothes. You can't get over that hurdle in your heart, right? Kushina patted her best friend's shoulder with a wicked smile and whispered in her ear, "It's okay, I can help you check the goods first." Mrs. Makoto's dignified and beautiful face immediately flushed with two bright red clouds, and she said angrily, "Shut up, you Shotacon. Not only do you have no shame, but you actually want to drag me down with you." Shotacon. Kushina didn't get angry, she stroked her chin and muttered, "Although it sounds like a pervert, it's at least better than the magical girl Uchiha Madara, right?" Hiss, don't mention it again. Things have changed, and now it's Mrs. Makoto's turn to put on the mask of pain. Tien Country, Sound Ninja Village. In the underground laboratory, Kabuto Yakushi and Orochimaru were intertwined. Bang! There was a muffled sound. Orochimaru involuntarily took a few steps back, and the vertical pupils in his eyes contracted violently. Opposite him, half of Yakushi Kabuto's face was covered by a white bone mask, and his eyes were flashing with a cruel and bloodthirsty look. "It's really surprising, Kabuto." Orochimaru covered the bruises on his right arm and grinned, "Even I can't say I can beat you now. Super Ninja, it really lives up to its name. Unfortunately, this is time limited." Yakushi Kabuto exhaled 2 puffs of white air, and the bone mask gradually faded from his face. Each time can only last for a maximum of 10 minutes. How many 10-minute battles do you think a ninja can last? Orochimaru chuckled and said calmly, "And in my opinion, this substance obviously has the potential to be further improved." As expected of Lord Orochimaru. Kabuto Yakushi bowed his head and said respectfully, "According to the researcher from the Umbrella Corporation, the maximum effect of the completed version should last for more than an hour." HMPH, a researcher. Orochimaru grinned and said in a hoarse voice, "It's Yakushi Nono, right?" "Yes." Yakushi Kabuto trembled slightly and nodded. "I don't care about your interpersonal relationships, Kabuto." Orochimaru glanced at him and said meaningfully, "I only care about how much value you can create for me. Creatures without value are not worthy of appearing in front of me." "I understand, Lord Orochimaru." Kabuto Yakushi responded. "You did a good job this time." Orochimaru grinned and said, "I am very interested in the Super Ninja's energy potion." Thanks to Lord Orochimaru for his training. Yakushi Kabuto lowered his head humbly and said, "It's a pity that my ability is limited. At present, I can only get back these 2 tubes. You are already proud enough to be able to steal something from Hanzo." Orochimaru shook his head and said with emotion, "I just didn't expect that the high-spirited demigod would now embark on this path." Orochimaru had no doubt that Hanzo was the man behind the Umbrella Corporation. Nowadays, except for Conan, Pain, Obito, and Black and White Zetsu, almost no one in the ninja world knew that this demigod had become a dead dog. He has planned to cooperate with Danzo of Konoha. Will it have any impact on us? Kabuto Yakushi asked in a puzzled manner. Orochimaru shook his head, a sinister smile appeared on his face and he said, "I know Danzo very well. After he gains this power, the first person he will trouble will definitely be my dear teacher. When the time comes, maybe we can help him." The morning breeze is blowing and the sun is shining brightly. Today is the annual grade competition of Konoha Ninja School, and the school also takes a day off because of this special day. The grade competition of the village ninja school is naturally not as grand as the Chunin exam jointly held by multiple villages, but at this time, the high platform of the entire school playground is already full of spectators. Among the audience were ninja school students who were ready to cheer for their friends, as well as parents of the contestants. But the real heavyweight guests are the 4 old men sitting side by side on the podium. In the center is Konoha Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, with root leader Danzo on the left, and strategic planning minister Elder Mitokado N on the right. And Utane Kaharu, who was sitting to Mitokado N's right, holding a teacup and pretending to be elegant. These 4 people hold the power of life and death over everything in Konoha and are truly the people at the top of power. The visit of such a person to the ninja school is naturally to demonstrate the Konoha high-level officials' attention to the training and cultivation of the new generation of ninjas. Naruto was also sitting in the audience, next to Shikamaru with his pineapple hair tied up. Blonde-haired Ino and pink-haired Sakura were on their left, with a seat between them. Please invite the contestants from Class 1, Grade 1, to enter first. With the announcement of the host referee, the grade competition officially began. Even if the first-year students were selected as contestants, they were just 2 little kids. They had only been in the ninja school for less than half a year, and their fighting style was clearly too immature. Not to mention the almost impossible to use ninjutsu, even the physical skills duel is laughable. Little pink fists fighting, pinching necks, stepping on toes. Seeing this, Danzo frowned and his face began to twitch as he said, "Hiruzen, is this the result of your meticulous improvement of the ninja school? I think education should be gradual." Sarutobi Hiruzen didn't care, but watched with great interest. Let the students get familiar with the theory first, and then slowly practice being a ninja. If such a waste goes to the battlefield, he won't be able to even withstand a kunai. Danzo said coldly. They are still students, Danzo. Sarutobi Hiruzen glanced at him and said lightly, "You are too impatient. The situation in the ninja world is ever-changing. Who knows what will happen in the next second?" Danzo retorted, and said in a low voice, "Instead of sending them to the battlefield to die in vain, it is better to use my training method. I really shouldn't have asked you here." Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed. HMPH, you are really getting weaker and weaker. Danzo snorted coldly, lowered his eyelids and stopped talking. But the fire in his heart that wanted to overthrow everything became stronger and stronger. In his opinion, Sarutobi Hiruzen was no longer worthy of the position of Hokage. If Konoha was handed over to him to manage, even if he was just a ninja school student, he would be able to take charge. Danzo, your thinking shouldn't be so radical in peacetime. Mitoman Yan, who was wearing glasses, suddenly interrupted and sighed, high-pressure management will only backfire. Yes, Danzo. Yutane Kaharu put the teacup in her hand aside and said lightly, it doesn't matter what you do in the roots, but under the sun is not a place for you to interfere. Okay, you are on the same side now, right? Danzo narrowed his eyes and stared at his 3 friends. The atmosphere became a little solemn at this moment. The next contestant to take the stage is from Class 4 of Grade 3. The referee's voice sounded, and Sarutobi Hiruzen coughed and said, it's the turn of the kid that Danzo and I are optimistic about. Danzo, Yutane Kaharu and Mitokado N all turned their eyes to the field, and a young man in a white robe and black-framed glasses came into their sight. Oh, I can tell from his appearance that this kid has a lot of temperament. Yutane Kaharu smiled and praised, I'm looking forward to his performance. Humph, it's more than just temperament. Danzo lowered his eyelids and said indifferently, this child is born to be a ninja, not some waste who plays house games. In Danzo's opinion, his new subordinate was perfect in every aspect except for his mental condition. Oh, even you give such a high evaluation. Mitoman Yan pushed his glasses on his face and laughed softly, it seems that this kid is really outstanding. Who is his opponent? Uchiha Sasuke. Sarutobi Hiruzen said. After the words fell, the atmosphere between the few people became silent again. The extermination of the Uchiha clan is closely related to these people present, and it can even be said that they were the ones who caused it. Now seeing the orphans of the Uchiha family, it is inevitable that I feel a little complicated. Come on, Yi Fang. Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs not far away, breaking the silence between Sarutobi Hiruzen and the others. Show that sissy some of your strength, you can do it. Shut up, what are you yelling about? Even though there was a seat between them, Haruno Sakura couldn't stand the little yellow-haired boys yelling. With a grin, she said angrily, there are so many people here, please pay attention to the impact. Also, Sasuke-kun is not a sissy. Being yelled at by the girl he liked, Naruto immediately wilted. He sat back in his seat and muttered, "He will be beaten by Yifeng anyway." "Impossible, Sasuke-kun is the strongest." Haruno Sakura responded sharply, snorting coldly, "Even if Yifeng really uses that disgusting attack, he can't hurt him. Yifeng told me that he learned a new trick." Naruto lowered his head and didn't dare to look into his eyes, but still said firmly, "I believe in him, he will definitely win." "Right, Shikamaru." As he spoke, he looked at his friend beside him with hope. Well, who knows? Shikamaru didn't intend to get involved in their argument, it was too childish. Come to think of it, Yifeng actually brought a sword today. Ino stared at the long sword hanging on Yifeng's waist, blinked and said, "So he has learned swordsmanship." "Hey, it's true." Naruto exclaimed again, his eyes wide open. Could his new special move be swordsmanship, like the samurai in the comics? How can a samurai be a match for a ninja? They have all been eliminated. Haruno Sakura rolled her eyes and whispered, "Why hasn't Sasuke-kun come on stage yet? I'm looking forward to what he'll wear for this occasion." Just as she finished her words, a young man wearing a blue cat suit walked in from the other end of the playground. Stunned. Seeing the blue cat boy walk briskly to the center of the field and stand still, Haruno Sakura was completely stunned. That's Sasuke-kun. That should be it." Ino also stared with a stunned expression and responded. "Cat, kitty." Naruto gasped. He didn't know what to say for a moment because of his enemy's outfit. He actually dressed so uniquely for such an occasion. What on earth was he trying to do? Is he planning to use this attire to distract Yifeng and thus achieve victory? Naruto gritted his teeth and looked angry when he thought of this. Damn, this bastard is so cunning. At this time, the Konoha F4 sitting on the dais looked at each other in bewilderment at Sasuke's slightly funny outfit. Hiruzen, is this the new trend among young people? Mito Kato-en pushed up his glasses, looking confused. Even if it's a trend, it shouldn't be used in this kind of situation, right? Yutain Kaharu frowned and speculated, is it possible that this is the tactic of that Uchiha kid? I think this is some kind of protective measure. Danzo held his chin with one hand, looked at his friend beside him and said, Hiruzen, what do you think he is defending against? Sarutobi Hiruzen was also confused at first, until he suddenly remembered a ridiculous thing that Iruka had reported to him. He was stunned for a moment, and the corner of his mouth twitched as he said, Defense Starry Sky. Answer, reply. Several Hokage advisors, including Danzo, were stunned. They have been ninjas all their lives, and have never heard of such an extraordinary attack method. No wonder the Uchiha kid wrapped himself up like a red envelope. Faced with an attack that was beyond the common sense of a ninja, it was understandable that he would take such extreme measures. But this should be a joke. Yutain Kaharu took a breath and said in disbelief, that kid won't use this trick, right? As he said this, he looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen with a seeking look. Yeah, I think it's just a joke. Sarutobi Hiruzen blew out a smoke ring from his mouth and whispered, Yifeng shouldn't be the kind of child with strange behavior. From the scholarly aura he exudes, we can tell that this child has a certain level of moral standards. Mizuto Menyon said. Only Danzo lowered his head and said nothing, with the corners of his mouth twitching slightly. As someone who had witnessed Yifeng's moral level and style with his own eyes, it was difficult for him to give any positive evaluation at this time. According to his understanding, there is a high probability that the child will do such a thing. The defense was full of stars, it was amazing. At this moment, he was extremely grateful that he had decisively turned around that day and did not insist on accepting this traitor who could make one's blood vessels burst. In the field, Yifeng looked at Sasuke in the bag in front of him and sighed, Sasuke's outfit today is really eye-catching. But I'm curious, don't you think that this outfit conflicts with your usual personality? Stop being so verbose. Sasuke was obviously a little upset by his words, and his cheeks turned slightly red behind the protective mask. This is a secret equipment prepared to defeat you. Xiaolin Yifeng, your special moves are no longer useful to me. I see, in order to counter my special attack. Yifeng suddenly realized, and said calmly, That really worked hard for you, cat class. Puff. Sasuke froze in his tracks when he called him, Neko-sensei. His handsome face flushed red as he said, you, stop yelling. I said this as a special equipment to deal with you. I didn't want to wear it myself. I understand, Cat-san. Yi Feng nodded, looking solemn. Thank you for your testimony, Cat-san. Asshole, are you humiliating me on purpose? Sasuke's face turned red instantly. He raised his fist and rushed towards Yi Feng. Although it looks like he is wearing a cat suit, strictly speaking, this is actually a combat uniform. The craftsmanship comes from the ninja tool merchant Cat Granny. The clothing fits closely but does not affect movement. The angle and momentum of his punch were completely different from those of the lower grade students before, and it could be considered a real killing skill. Even the discerning Danzo couldn't help but frown at this moment and whispered, the Uchiha clan is really blessed. Although the young man in front of him could not be compared with his elder brother Uchiha Itachi, his angry punch was no less than that of a genin. Boom. A muffled sound was heard in the field. Yi Feng raised his hand calmly and held Sasuke's fist tightly, performing the whole process with ease. Blocked. Ha 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 ha. Naruto laughed out loud, looking smug and said, I said this sissy is no match for Yi Feng. Uzumaki Naruto. Haruno Sakura said angrily. I should have warned you that there was no need to call Sasuke-kun a sissy. It actually blocked it. Ino covered her mouth and said in surprise, I'm afraid Yi Feng is really a dark horse. Ino, whose side are you on? Haruno Sakura looked dissatisfied. Let's talk about the matter at hand. Ino looked at her best friend and said with a smile, don't worry, the game has just begun. Our Sasuke-kun hasn't shown his true skills yet. HMPH. Haruno Sakura snorted and let her go, looking back at the field. Unlike Haruno Sakura, who was full of confidence in him, Sasuke himself had a few drops of cold sweat on his forehead at this time. How is it possible? The situation before his eyes was obviously very different from what he had expected. Although this punch of his was an angry attack, it was not a random punch. If the opponent had dodged or blocked the punch in a conventional way, he could understand it, but Yi Feng blocked his fist with just one hand, which was a bit hard for Sasuke to accept. Are you surprised, cat classmate? Yi Feng said calmly, without any sadness or joy. Actually, I am more surprised than you. What? Sasuke looked at him with wide eyes. Your brother Uchiha Itachi should be more than this at his age, right? Yi Feng let go of his hand, took 2 steps back and said, or do you think you are just an ordinary person compared to the genius Itachi? Shut up. Sasuke lowered his head, his tone angry. Why, was I right? The lenses on Yi Feng's face reflected a bright silver light, and the corners of his mouth curved with a hint of mockery. I told you to shut up. Sasuke roared and quickly formed seals with his hands. That is, you can actually use this kind of ninjutsu at this age. Sarutobi Hiruzen and the others on the high platform looked moved. The scene before them was obviously beyond their expectations. Art Fire Escape Ho Fireball. Sasuke opened his mouth and a ball of red flame burst out of his mouth. This is bad, that's AC level fire ninjutsu. Shikamaru's lazy expression disappeared and his eyes became serious. Is Yi Feng okay? Naruto looked worried. Not only him, Haruno Sakura and Yamanaka Ino were not happy about Sasuke's use of fire release ninjutsu at this time. Instead, they covered their mouths with their hands and looked worried. They wanted Sasuke to win the game, but they didn't want anything to happen to their classmates. From the perspective of these spectators, Yi Feng, whose whole body was wrapped in flames, would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. Even the referee found the scene a little unexpected and was ready to jump into the field to save people. But suddenly, a thick fog rose up. Sasuke only felt a figure shaking in front of him, and when he reacted, a blade was already on his neck. Kai. The fog dissipated, and all the spectators around saw the reversal scene before their eyes. It seems that I won, Sasuke. Yi Feng curled his lips and laughed softly. Sasuke's body trembled slightly, and he took a breath and asked, Just now, what was that? I created this illusion. Yi Feng put down the blade in his hand and stabbed it into the ground. It uses the reflection of fog and water to confuse the enemy and make them appear dazed during the battle. A self-created illusion. Sasuke's pupils constricted and his expression was a little unbelievable. The other party actually created this level of illusion at this age. Even Itachi might not be able to do it. Well, its name is Mirror Flower and Water Moon. Yi Feng laughed softly. Didn't you see that when he said the 4 words, Mirror Flower and Water Moon, the blade stuck in the ground flashed with blue light? So, this is the ultimate move you mentioned earlier. Sasuke seemed to have finally figured something out, and he breathed a sigh of relief and said, I lost this time. Yi Feng, with a gentle smile on his face, was about to nod in response when a golden options interface suddenly popped up. Open black lens bracket choose. Close black lens bracket. 1. Show Uchiha Sasuke your true trick, super dress up gothic Lolita version. 2. Show Uchiha Sasuke your true trick, conscience enlargement technique. Yi Feng couldn't hold it together a little, and the corners of his mouth began to twitch slightly. The winner is Zhaolin Yifeng. The entire audience was in an uproar as the referee made the loud announcement. It was quite a big deal to see ninjutsu and genjutsu being shown against each other among ninja school students. Even most ninja school graduates only knew the basic ninjutsu, the 3 body techniques. How could this be? Sasuke-kun actually lost. Haruno Sakura still couldn't accept the reality, her expression was dull. Yifeng is really incredible. Yamanaka Ino was obviously more rational than her, and murmured in a low voice, I'm afraid he is not much worse than those official ninjas now. Mirror flowers and water moons. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow and sighed, this guy must have practiced secretly in the dark. How hateful, he always pretended to be a salted fish in the past. Compared to his classmates, Naruto acted much simpler. He yelled excitedly at the top of his voice. I won, Yifeng really won. Ha 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 ha, that arrogant Sasuke actually has this day. On the high platform, the Konoha F4 sitting side by side obviously also felt that this battle was remarkable. I didn't expect that this kid could create his own illusion. He's on par with the geniuses in Konoha's history. Utane Kaharu held the teacup and took a sip. It seems that the buds of our Konoha are about to grow up. Mito Kato Yan smiled with relief and said, what plans does Hiruzen have for the child's future? Planning. Sarutobi Hiruzen glanced at Danzo beside him and said meaningfully, I originally planned to let this child complete the 6-year course, but now it seems that his talent should not be buried in the ninja school. Mizuto Menyon was stunned and said, you mean? Let Yifeng take part in next year's Chunin exam. Sarutobi Hiruzen said calmly. Chunin exam. Danzo narrowed his eyes and looked at his friend. He had already seen that this guy wanted to poach people from his roots. But he didn't quite understand why his good friend suddenly mentioned the Chunin exam. The day before yesterday, Onoki from the Iwagakure village sent us a document, hoping that this Chunin exam could be held jointly with our Konoha. Sarutobi Hiruzen blew out a puff of smoke and explained softly. The day before yesterday. Danzo frowned and said coldly, why didn't I know about this? He cast his gaze towards the other 2 Hokage advisors and noticed that they were all evasive in their gazes. We were afraid that you would object. Utane Kaharu coughed lightly and said, so we wanted to keep it a secret from you for the time being and make the decision directly. Konoha can no longer withstand the turmoil, Danzo. Mitoman Yan sighed and chimed in, the Iwagakure village is showing goodwill to us now, we must seize this opportunity. You guys. Danzo felt betrayed and veins bulged on the back of his hands. He was obviously an elder of Konoha and the Hokage's advisor, but he was excluded from the discussion of such an important matter. Is there any law in this world? Danzo, don't blame us. Sarutobi Hiruzen's voice became gentle, and he tapped the pipe on the table. We kept it a secret from you for the sake of Konoha. In this era, only by building good relations with other ninja villages can Konoha become more prosperous. Danzo said nothing, his eyelids lowered. Until Yutane Kaharu couldn't stand the heavy atmosphere anymore and wanted to say something to ease it, she saw the man opposite her suddenly smiled and said, "I understand, Hiruzen. Aren't you angry?" Sarutobi Hiruzen asked cautiously. "Do you think I am such a petty person?" Danzo glanced at him and said calmly, "It is indeed a good thing to jointly conduct the Chunin exam with other villages. It can publicize the strength of Konoha." Sarutobi Hiruzen breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I'm glad you understand. It's just that I think that the Iwagakure village alone is not enough." After a pause, Danzo continued, "As the organizer, we should send invitations to the other major ninja villages. Anyone who is willing can come and participate." Sarutobi Hiruzen, Utatane Kaharu, and Mito Kato En looked at each other. Mito Kato En asked, "Will this cause any safety risks? Will there be no hidden dangers if we only hire an Iwagakure?" Danzo asked back, expressionless, "Since we want to establish good relations with other ninja villages, this is a good opportunity." Hiruzen, "I think Danzo's suggestion is a good one." Utatane Kaharu put down the teacup in her hand and said softly, "We can jointly hold the Chunin exam with the Iwagakure village, so there is no reason why we can't add other ninja villages into the mix." "I agree too." Mizuto Menyon continued. "Let me give it a try." Sarutobi Hiruzen held his pipe in his mouth, feeling vaguely uneasy. The source of the problem lies in this good friend of mine. As an extreme warmonger, not only did he not oppose the joint Chunin exam, but he also suggested sending invitations to other villages. What exactly does this guy want to do? He subconsciously glanced at Danzo, only to see him sitting there leisurely with a gloomy face. "Hey, what does that kid want to do?" Yutane Kaharu's exclamation interrupted Sarutobi Hiruzen's thoughts. Everyone followed her gaze and saw that Yi Feng, the winner, suddenly reached out and put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder. "You actually guessed wrong, Sasuke-san." Yi Feng's voice was very soft, but with the help of the special loudspeaker in the field, everyone could still hear their conversation clearly. "Mirror Flower Water Moon is not my real trick." Not only Sasuke, but other audience members on the stage also showed curiosity. "Do you want to see it?" Yi Feng said with a smile. "What kind of trick is it? We want to see it. Quick, show it to us." Before Sasuke could speak, the audience around him had already started shouting with anticipation. The loudest among them was indeed Naruto, whose face was flushed with excitement. "Oh no, this guy might come to curse again." Kushina was knowledgeable and saw through the essence of the matter at a glance. "Will Sasuke be in danger?" Mrs. Makoto asked worriedly. "There's a high probability that there will be no physical danger," Kushina analyzed calmly. "That's good." Mrs. Makoto breathed a sigh of relief. She knew that once Yi Feng's curse took effect, it would be irreversible, so as long as her youngest son was not in danger, it would be fine. Sasuke felt a lot of pressure at this time. Deep down he wanted to see Yi Feng's special moves, but instinctively he felt that something bad was going to happen. But in this state of being the center of attention, he couldn't admit defeat. For the honor of the Uchiha, he could only bite the bullet and say, since it's a special move, it should be used as a trump card. "Is there any problem with you showing it now?" "Don't worry, Sasuke." Yi Feng's smile grew even wider. "Has a problem." Sasuke felt that this trick had a big problem, and even quietly took 2 steps back. He opened his mouth to refuse, but saw the boy opposite him saying, "Super dressing technique." A black light suddenly appeared on Sasuke's body, so bright that everyone couldn't open their eyes for a moment. After a while, the light faded away. The entire conference hall suddenly fell into silence. Sasuke, who was originally wearing a blue cat suit, has now changed into a black gothic Lolita skirt, and his hedgehog-like short hair has turned into black twin ponytails tied with bows. The body is in a duck-sitting position, with both hands supporting the ground in front of him. There is an expression of disbelief and fear on his handsome face, which makes me feel so pitiful. Congratulations on obtaining the Yinten Chakra Nature Change. Close black lens bracket. The reward prompt that popped up from the system made Yi Feng breathe a sigh of relief, and he raised his hand to return the clothes to the boy in front of him. "Take a picture." Mrs. Makoto's voice suddenly sounded. Ah. Yi Feng was stunned and even thought he was hallucinating. Take a picture of Sasuke now, I'll make it your desktop wallpaper later. Mrs. Makoto urged. Madam, you are truly my mother. Yi Feng couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. He took out a camera from his personal space and pressed the shutter button at the lowly version of Sasuke. The night is dark and the sky is full of twinkling stars. Within the root tissue base, Shimura Danzo's bandaged arm drooped in front of his chest, and the other arm was supported on the armrest. He looked down at Yi Feng in the audience and said indifferently, Sarutobi Hiruzen plans to let you participate in the Chunin exam in 7 months. What do you think? Yi Feng, who was wearing black framed glasses, was stunned for a moment, then lowered his head and said, I will follow the instructions of Master Danzo. Okay, I didn't misjudge you. Danzo nodded with satisfaction and said calmly, I was very satisfied with your match with the Uchiha brat this time. Thanks to the cultivation of Lord Danzo. Yi Feng said humbly. Since Sarutobi Hiruzen has chosen your name, you should go and take part in the Chunin exam. Danzo ordered, and said coldly, but remember, your true identity belongs to the root. Yes, Lord Danzo. Yi Feng nodded solemnly. What does this old guy mean? The root no longer belongs to Konoha. Kushina's confused voice sounded. It should be that something unpleasant happened between him and the Hokage. Yi Feng made a guess in his heart, and said, also, this Danzo is likely to do something during the Chunin exams. Do something? Kushina was stunned. It's really exciting. How intense will the infighting among Konoha's high-level officials be? Yi Feng sighed inwardly, but remained calm on the surface. Show me and my colleagues your self-created illusion again. I think its name is Mirror Flower and Water Moon. Danzo looked at the guard standing beside him and said calmly, Chen, go and try it. The guard wearing a monkey mask slowly stepped down and drew the ninja sword from behind. Yi Feng didn't say much, and also drew out the long sword from his waist. He raised the index and middle fingers of his left hand, and said softly, Mirror Flower Water Moon. Puff. A ball of mist suddenly exploded with him as the center, and the sharp blade light drew a cold arc. Clang. Chen held his blade with the ninja sword in his hand and said lightly, Nice illusion, but your sword is not sharp yet. Thank you for your correction. Yi Feng put the knife back into the sheath and saluted sincerely. Chen nodded slightly and stood back beside Danzo again. Chen will accompany you on your trip to Wave Country tomorrow. Danzo lowered his eyes and said without any sadness or joy, when you return after completing your mission, he will personally guide you in the practice of swordsmanship. Yes, thank you for your care, Master Danzo. Yi Feng was standing strangely behind Danzo at this time, with a rather sarcastic smile on his face. Danzo himself and all the root members around him turned a blind eye to this. In their eyes, Yi Feng still stood in the hall with a respectful expression. It's really amazing, is this the power of the mirror flowers and water moons? Mrs. Makoto said with a shocked expression. You said that if I put a pile of dog shit on Danzo's head at this time, he wouldn't be able to notice it. Kushina crawled out of the spirit orb directly, staring at the back of Danzo's head and fell into deep thought. Do you want to try it? Yi Feng asked with a smile. Forget it. Kushina shook her head and sighed, it's a bit insulting to do this. Well, let's go back then. Yi Feng turned around gracefully and said calmly, go to bed early, we still have to go to Wave Country tomorrow. He left openly in public, and no one was surprised. The next evening, in the dense forests of the far suburbs of Wave Country, Yi Feng stopped walking. He looked up at the birds flying over the treetops and sighed, I didn't expect that the woods at dusk would contain such a different kind of beauty. It's really refreshing. Now is not the time to enjoy the scenery. Chen, who was standing behind him and wearing a monkey mask, said coldly, don't forget the task assigned by Danzo-sama, Zhaolin Yi Feng. We have arrived at the mission location, Mr. Chen. Yi Feng turned around and looked at him with a smile. I don't like boring jokes. Chen said lightly with no expression under the mask. Indeed, the order that Danzo-sama gave to Weiyu was to meet at the East District Street of Wave Country. Yifeng smiled and said, "Logically, we should have ambushed there as well." Chen didn't say anything, just looked at him calmly. But unfortunately, Yifeng looked up at the sky dyed red by the setting sun and said softly, "The streets of the East District have been transformed into the Bo National Academy campus. I don't think it is suitable for killing." "Not suitable." Chen narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Who do you think you are, Zhaolin Yifeng? That is the order of Danzo-sama, and we, as root ninjas, only need to execute it." "You are so rigid, Mr. Chen." Yifeng sighed and said, "But it is precisely because your personality is rigid enough that Lord Danzo regards you as his confidant." "What do you mean?" Chen frowned under his mask. "The rulers of the ninja world all like rigid subordinates who will be foolishly loyal to them." Yifeng curled his lips and said in a sarcastic tone, "Those who have a little bit of self-awareness and ability will be labeled as rebels by them, and they can't wait to strangle them. Ninja is really a cruel profession." Swish. As soon as the words fell, a female figure suddenly appeared from the side and knelt on one knee behind Yifeng. "Master Chief." The woman had long light gray hair and was probably in her early 20s. She was wearing a neat combat uniform with arm sleeves tied around her arms. She had regular features and a pretty appearance, and she looked at Yifeng with eyes full of respect and admiration. "It's you." Chen obviously recognized the woman's identity. She was the target of their mission this time. But what he found strange was why Weiyu called the boy, leader. "What's the matter? Ms. Weiyu, you should know that I don't like people kneeling down." Yifeng's voice was calm, but it carried an unquestionable tone. "Sorry, Chief." Weiyu quickly stood up and stood behind Yifeng with his head down. "Shaolin Yifeng, you actually betrayed Lord Danzo." Chen suddenly spoke angrily. The lenses on Yifeng's face reflected an orange halo under the setting sun, and he said sarcastically, "You have to understand one thing, Mr. Chen. From the beginning to the end, I never said that I would be loyal to Danzo-sama, but Danzo-sama took the initiative to pull me into the route. You deserve to die." As Danzo's most loyal lackey, Chen certainly wouldn't listen to Yifeng's twisted logic. He pulled out the blade behind him, and rushed towards the boy opposite like an arrow. Swish. A brilliant blade light flashed in the air, even the air was torn apart. The dance of the three suns and moons. What Chen is currently displaying is the secret of the Konoha-style swordsmanship, inherited from the crescent moon dance of the second Hokage. Although he was just a lackey of Danzo, Chen's swordsmanship was definitely the best in Konoha today. The brilliant and dazzling sword light instantly enveloped Yifeng's entire body. Scoff. The boy's body was cut into several pieces in an instant, but he turned into a puff of smoke and disappeared in front of Chen. "What?" Chen was stunned, with an expression of disbelief on his face. Instantaneous body movement. But even if it was the instant body movement technique, it couldn't be like this. "Behind you, Mr. Chen." The boy's voice suddenly sounded, interrupting Chen's thoughts. Turning around hastily, he saw the young man holding up a long sword, with the blade reflecting a cold light. Chen was already unable to dodge and instinctively raised his sword to block. Clang. The severed half of the blade in his hand fell to the ground, and Chen showed an expression of disbelief on his face. "Is my knife sharp enough now, Mr. Chen?" Yifeng raised the corners of his mouth, and his eyes behind the lenses showed a playful look. Chen opened his mouth, but was unable to speak. A knife wound extended directly from his left shoulder to his waist and abdomen, and bright red blood spurted out. In the land of waves, the reception room of the Umbrella Corporation. Wearing a respirator on his face and covered with strange cracks, Hanzo sat on the sofa, concentrating on studying the book in his hand. His expression was very focused, and his eyes were getting brighter and brighter as he stared at the book in front of him. After turning the last page, he could not help but let out a long sigh and said, "I have lived for decades, but this is the first time I have seen someone like you who can analyze the entire ninja world so thoroughly. The necessary condition for peace in the ninja world is for the major ninja villages to abandon their own selfish schemes. This sentence is simply the finishing touch. I am honored to receive praise from the demigod of the ninja world." Yi Feng smiled as he sat in the main seat. Sitting behind him was Rina Uzumaki, who was wearing a black suit. This lady's job in Wave Country was the secretary of the leader. I am so ashamed. Hanzo sighed and lowered his head. I am no longer the high-spirited demigod I once was. I am just a useless person who is struggling to survive and living in my own world. It's rare for a person to be self-critical. Yi Feng curved his lips and smiled slightly. Since you are aware of your current situation, you have the possibility of transformation. Sir Yi Feng. Hanzo looked up at the boy not far away. What you are going to do is truly change the entire ninja world. But this road may not be easy to take. The biggest obstacle to changing the world is all the systems maintained by the current ninja world. The defenders of these systems are the cage of each village, the daimyo of each major country, the nobles, and the high-ranking officials in power. They will not give up their own interests and will definitely fight to the death. In other words, the enemy that Wave Country will face at that time is the entire ninja world today. Is it possible to win in this situation? Indeed, this is a road full of thorns and blood. Yi Feng did not deny it, and said calmly, Then, Mr. Hanzo, are you willing to go with all of us, the people of Wave Country, to see the bright and magnificent scene at the end of this road? Hanzo was silent for a long time, then bowed slightly to Yi Feng. Then please take care of me, Chief. Welcome to join us, Comrade Hanzo. Yi Feng smiled gently and said, For our phased plan, we will need you to play the role of the general manager of this umbrella company for a long time. Yes. Hanzo nodded, not feeling any pressure at all about this kind of task. Click. The door closed and Hanzo left the living room. Yi Feng leaned back in his boss chair with his eyes closed, and began to think about the next development route for the Kingdom of Wave. Now the college area has been planned and the compulsory education policy has begun to be implemented. The factory buildings in the industrial zone are still under construction and it will take about 2 months before it is officially put into production. Without factories, it is impossible to produce equipment on a large scale. Even though he has pointed out the use of technology like the internet, there is no way to popularize it. This also involves the purchase of large quantities of raw materials, and the existing reserve funds of the Wave Country may not be able to sustain it for long. Although he inherited 5 billion in cash from Cardo, most of it had been spent on infrastructure. The foundation of the Wave Country is too poor. Without comprehensive large-scale infrastructure construction, many plans cannot be implemented. It was a pleasure when I was spending money, but now it hurts. Where to get the money? Yi Feng felt a little headache and frowned slightly. At this moment, a pair of soft and skillful hands held his head, and pressed the acupuncture points on his head in a very regular manner, and a light and elegant jasmine fragrance also penetrated into his nostrils. How is it? Is this strength okay? Mrs. Rina asked softly. Not bad, very professional. Yi Feng opened his eyes and smiled. I also know some unprofessional skills. Would you like to try, Chief? Mrs. Rina put her mouth close to his ear and spoke with a sweet breath. Well, let's talk about this later. Yi Feng's forehead was covered with a drop of cold sweat. He smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. It's getting late, why don't you go and rest first? Okay. Mrs. Rina was very sensible and didn't argue anymore. She just gently touched Yi Feng's cheek. If the leader needs you, you can come to me anytime. Get up and walk out of the living room. If you need anything, you can come to me anytime. Not long after Mrs. Rina left, Kushina came out of his body and said in a teasing tone, Tisk tisk tisk, it turns out that being a leader is so hard. Not only do you have to work during the day, but you also have to deal with your secretary's not-so-professional massage at night. Not at all. Yi Feng's mouth twitched, and he said helplessly, You should know what I do every day. That's hard to say. Kushina reached out and gently patted his chest, saying meaningfully, Makoto and I were also fooled by your tricks. It would be too easy for you to do something in the middle of the night without letting us know. Right, Makoto. I won't talk, you guys chat. Mrs. Makoto obviously didn't intend to get involved in such a dangerous topic. But there is one thing I am very curious about. Kushina stretched out her arms and wrapped them around Yifeng's neck, then turned over and sat on his stomach. She put her mouth close to his ear and whispered, "Can the current leader really perform that kind of unprofessional massage?" This unique stimulation made Yifeng gasp. Kushina's icy cold palm was like a swimming fish, moving down along his chest. Mrs. Masaki, who was hiding in the soul orb, blushed as she watched this scene, but her eyes were still wide open with no intention of closing them. Bang bang bang. At this critical moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Kushina's movements came to an abrupt halt, and she quickly returned to the spirit pearl. It was not until then that she realized what she had just done. Her heart beat faster and her face felt like it was burning. Yifeng, who was tempted, was naturally not in a good mood. He just pretended not to care and said softly, "Come in. Master Chief, someone is here to see you." Standing outside the door was Teacher Nono. She took the initiative to move aside, and Xiaonan, dressed in a black robe with red clouds, came into Yifeng's sight. "Sister Nan." Yifeng showed a look of surprise on his face. "Long time no see, Yifeng." Meeting the boy again, Conan's cold face showed a slight smile. "Just like a white lotus blooming on a snowy mountain, pure and beautiful. I came here this time on Nagato's request to invite you. Why is your face so red? Maybe the room is not ventilated and it's a bit stuffy." Yifeng smiled calmly. Nono, who was standing next to Xiaonan, had a strange expression on his face. "The room was a bit stuffy. The windows behind you were all open, how could it be stuffy?" But now that there were guests present, she didn't expose it. Conan wasn't as perceptive as Nono, so she nodded and believed the boy's lies. "Nagato wants to invite you to join the Akatsuki organization. He is willing to step down and make you the new leader." "There's nothing wrong with joining Akatsuki, let alone the position of leader." Yifeng pondered for a moment, raised his head and looked at Xiaonan and smiled. "I think it's better to start as an intern." 2 days later in the morning, Yifeng brought Weiyu back to Konoha. "What feelings do you have when you see the village you haven't seen for a long time?" Yifeng turned his head and smiled at Weiyu, who was wearing a monkey face mask. "This is not my place to live." Gray Feather's expression under the mask fluctuated a little, but soon returned to normal. "The Wave Country led by the leader is it. You don't have to answer so seriously." Yifeng shook his head slightly and said gently, "There is actually no difference between the people of Konoha and the people of Wave Country. The mistakes of the rulers should not be blamed on the people." "I understand." Weiyu nodded respectfully. "Next you have to play the role of Chen in front of Danzo. Do you feel pressured?" Yifeng asked with a smile. Weiyu was silent for a moment, then said solemnly, "A little. But for the sake of the leader and the future of Wave Country, I will do my best." Actually, more than just a little. Although she was wearing Chen's root uniform and the same monkey mask on her face, she was playing a role that she was not familiar with. "And he's a male ninja. A woman like me is going to play a male ninja, and Danzo's confidant at that. This is ridiculous no matter how you think about it. If we meet, I'm afraid I'll be exposed on the spot." If this wasn't a plan personally proposed by the young leader in front of her and guaranteed to be foolproof, Weiyu would have suspected that there was a traitor trying to harm her. But even for the leader whom he trusted wholeheartedly, Weiyu felt that this role-playing plan was a bit ridiculous. What kind of illusion can change people's basic common sense? This is theoretically impossible. "You're a little nervous, Ms. Weiyu." Yifeng could see her current state at a glance and chuckled, "Don't worry, I will go with you to see Danzo." "Yifeng." A familiar exclamation sounded, and the little yellow-haired boy in an orange coat came closer. "Where have you been these past 2 days? Why did you go missing with that cocky Sasuke?" "I went out of the village to do some business." Yifeng answered with a smile. "Another blind date." Naruto blinked, and then he realized that there was someone standing next to his friend. "Damn it, it's you again." Weiyu was a little confused by this sudden malice. "Pay attention to the hair, Naruto." Yifeng sighed and said helplessly, "They are not the same person." "Ah, sorry." Naruto was stunned for a moment, scratched his head and said, "Your masks are exactly the same, both have monkey faces." Okay, the only way to recognize people is by looking at their masks, right? Yifeng's mouth twitched slightly, and he said, "I have something to do now, let's talk later." "Okay, see you at school tomorrow." Naruto nodded, then left leisurely with his head resting on his head. This silly child is really hopeless. Kushina, who was holding the spirit pearl, covered her face and sighed. "It's okay, at least he will have a good father in the future," Mrs. Makoto said with a gloating smile on her face. Root tissue base. Yifeng skillfully took out a jar of stinky pickles from his personal space and placed it in front of Danzo. "Danzo-sama, here is the head of gray feather." Ellipsis. Wei Yu himself twitched his lips when watching this scene, wondering if his leader had gone crazy. This was not the way to fool a fool, using a jar of pickles as a human head. Who wouldn't be furious after seeing this? But the result was unexpected. Under Wei Yu's stunned gaze, Danzo held the jar of pickled vegetables and examined it for a long time, then nodded expressionlessly. "Yes, you completed the mission very well." Did he believe it? Wei Yu opened his mouth with disbelief on his face. Did he really believe that this jar of pickled vegetables was his own head? No, are you kidding me? Is this root leader blind? Even if he is blind, he can still smell the stench of pickled vegetables. It didn't. Danzo seemed to have determined that the jar of stinky pickles was her, Wei Yu's head, and the exposed pickle roots were her hair. "Throw this traitor's head into the recycling room." Pointing at the jar of stinky pickles in front of him, Danzo told one of his men, "This is what she deserves." Yes. The named root member looked respectful, picked up the stinky pickles and left the hall. Not only Danzo, but even the root members present here think that this is their own head. The expression beneath the gray-feathered monkey mask was filled with astonishment. What level of illusion did their leader use to achieve such an extent? "Shaolin Yifeng, you can go back and rest first." Danzo lowered his eyelids and said lightly, "Starting tomorrow, you will be a core member of the root." "Thank you for your appreciation, Lord Danzo." Yifeng nodded respectfully, but moved his feet behind Danzo. From Wei Yu's perspective, Danzo seemed to be unable to see this abnormal behavior. He seemed to really think that his leader had left, and he said to Wei Yu in the field, "Chen, how is that thing going?" Wei Yu was completely numb now, and he didn't feel strange at all that Danzo in front of him really thought he was Chen. According to the originally set lines, he said respectfully, "Hanzo of the Salamander agreed to cooperate with us, but..." "What does he want?" Danzo asked calmly. "Money." The price they offered was 10 million ryo for one super ninja potion. 10 million taels. Danzo frowned and began to think. This price was not cheap. 10 million taels was equivalent to 5S level commissions. But it was not so high that he would be discouraged. At most he could ask the village to help him share some of the burden. If you think about it carefully, what he is doing now is also for the village. Taking a deep breath, Danzo narrowed his eyes and said, "Agree to the offer and ask him to send 10 first." "Yes." Wei Yu nodded, his eyes suddenly widened. She saw that 3 stinky pickles had grown on Danzo's head. The leaves were hanging down and covering his forehead, making him look extremely funny. "What are you looking at?" Danzo noticed her dull expression and asked coldly. "No, I." Wei Yu looked at the young leader behind Danzo with a twitching mouth, only to see the other party smiling and waving at him gently. Danzo was totally unaware of all this, and didn't seem to notice anything unusual at all. Exaggerate. Wei Yu could only say that his leader's illusion was really exaggerated. He was totally making a fool of Danzo. But it's not over yet. Just when Wei Yu was about to say goodbye and leave, he saw his leader suddenly holding a green turtle in his hand. Still alive, struggling in Yifeng's hands. Question mark. Wei Yu was completely stunned and just watched the other party put the turtle on Danzo's head. "No, you don't feel anything like this. That turtle bit your scalp. It's bleeding, your head is bleeding. Also, where did this turtle come from?" What kind of leader would actually carry a turtle with him? Wei Yu complained madly in his heart. Then, the young leader pulled out a camera from the void. Without hesitation, he aimed the lens at Danzo with the turtle on his head and pressed the shutter. Konoha, Yifeng's cottage. Ha ha ha, this is really funny. Looking at the photo on the table, Kushina laughed so hard that she almost couldn't stand up straight. Danzo and Wangbei are really a good match. If this photo is sent out, it will definitely become a world-famous painting. You're amazing, to be able to come up with such a clever idea. Mrs. Makoto said with a strange look on her face. Hey, this is all thanks to the valuable experience I learned from someone. Kushina glanced meaningfully at a young man sitting on a chair. No, can this be related to me? Yifeng looked aggrieved, and said, I don't think I've ever put a turtle on someone's head, right? You've done similar things before. You've learned from what you've seen and heard. Kushina winked at him and said with a sly smile, don't deny it. God, I've been influenced by it so much. This red-haired old mother has really learned bad things now, and she can even shift the blame in such a refreshing and refined way. Who taught her? But it seems that she has never come into contact with anyone else except herself and Mrs. Makoto. Wrong. Maybe it's not taught by others, but it's the release of one's nature now. Yifeng nodded suddenly, thinking that this answer was very reasonable. It could even be said to be the only correct answer. Hee, are you plotting against me in your heart? Kushina suddenly stepped forward and grabbed his neck, saying viciously, little bastard, I think you need to be taught a lesson. No, no. Yifeng pretended to be suffocated and began to struggle. He actually enjoyed the physical contact with the red-haired lady, even though Kushina wasn't really her real body right now. Kushina, please let him go. Uchiha Makoto looked a little anxious and urged, I don't think Yifeng would do such a thing. Hey, what do you mean? Kushina looked at her and raised her eyebrows and said, you're already protecting me before I'm even healed. What do you mean by easy or not? Mrs. Masaka blushed immediately. He's just pretending. You're still too young. Kushina said this but still let go of Yifeng. I'll let you go this time. Go cook. You can't eat the food I cook. Mrs. Makoto said speechlessly. It smells good too. Kushina sent Yifeng away and sat down on a chair. You don't know, this little bastard's cooking skills are really remarkable. If I were alive, I would definitely cry out of greed. I see you're not just greedy for other people's food, are you? Mrs. Makoto said softly as she came in front of her. Hee, we are the same. Kushina retorted, hinting, you were also very absorbed in watching the show that day. If you can't help it, you can just join in. Mrs. Makoto stopped talking immediately. She was indeed no match for Kushina in terms of shamelessness. Dong dong dong. There was a sudden rhythmic knock on the door. Who could it be at this time? Kushina asked puzzledly. It could be your son. Mrs. Makoto made a guess and suggested, why don't you go open the door and give him a surprise? Naruto doesn't even know I'm his mother, what a surprise. Kushina rolled her eyes. That's right. Makoto nodded in realization. As the two ladies were talking, they skillfully entered the Soul Yunning Pearl. At this time, Yifeng had just brought the prepared dishes to the table. He wiped his hands and opened the door. Unexpectedly, there was a very rare guest standing outside the door at this time. Sasuke-san. Yifeng looked quite surprised. Shaolin Yifeng, I. Sasuke opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but seemed to find it difficult to speak. Come in first. Yifeng saw his embarrassment and stepped aside to let him in. Have you eaten? I have eaten. Sasuke looked around the room and his eyes fixed on the two dishes on the dining table. Gulu. My stomach started to growl. Awkward. Sasuke's cheeks were red, embarrassment written all over his face. It's boring to eat alone. Do you mind eating with me for another meal, Sasuke? Yifeng found a brand new set of tableware from the cupboard and handed it to him, smiling, it just so happens that I cooked a lot of dishes today. Excuse me. Sasuke took the cutlery, a little afraid to look at the other person. Very stiff. This proud Uchiha orphan really felt like dying at this moment. This child still says one thing and means another. Mrs. Masaka in the soul orb sighed. Hey, isn't that just a Tsunere? Kushina patted her shoulder and smiled. It's okay, at least he will have a good father in the future. Mrs. Makoto couldn't help but twitch her lips. It was obvious that my best friend was returning the tables. I had been teasing her with these words during the day, and now she was saying them back to me. How can someone who already has children still have such a strong desire for revenge? These two best friends are loving and hating each other inside Yifeng's body, but the outside environment has fallen into a strange silence. Sasuke ate in silence, and Yifeng would pick up some food for him from time to time. It wasn't until the two large plates of food were wiped out that Sasuke realized that he was being taken care of. They were obviously of the same age, but he didn't think there was anything wrong with it before. Natural. Everything seemed natural, as if the person of the same age in front of me should be my elder. Thinking of this, Sasuke felt a little confused again. He doesn't understand. Why can I take it for granted? Was it because of the humiliation Yi Feng had inflicted on him during the grade competition a few days ago? So he went to someone's house and showed off two large plates of food, giving himself the pleasure of revenge. Does Sasuke have something bothering him? Yi Feng suddenly spoke up, interrupting Sasuke's inner thoughts. Why not tell me about it? Sasuke took a deep breath and said solemnly, I want you to guide me to become stronger. This was the decision he made after careful consideration over the past few days. Although Yi Feng's last wave of costume-changing skills made Sasuke feel extremely ashamed and indignant, and his scalp still tingles when he thinks about it now, he is convinced from the bottom of his heart that he lost to the opponent. Crush. He was completely and undisputedly crushed by his opponent. At the same age, Yi Feng possesses such terrifying strength. This means that the other party must have mastered an extraordinary method of becoming stronger. Sasuke wants to learn. He wants to become stronger. This is the only way to get revenge on that man. For this, he was even willing to put aside his pride and personal honor. Become stronger. Yi Feng pondered for a moment and smiled slightly. That's no problem. Even for Mrs. Makoto's sake, I will spare no effort to help you. Thank you very much. Sasuke bowed and thanked sincerely. Don't thank me yet, Sasuke-kun. Yi Feng shook his head and said softly, the way I'm going to teach you to become stronger will probably be a very hard and difficult process. Are you really willing to learn? I don't care. Sasuke said with a firm look in his eyes and a serious expression. No matter how hard or difficult it is, I will stick to it. Very good. Yi Feng nodded in satisfaction and took out two scrolls from the desk. Take this back and finish it. If you can get 50 points, we can start. Sasuke took the scroll and looked at it blankly. Open black lens bracket primary school students mock test paper, revised version close black lens bracket. Early morning, ninja school. Yifeng came very early today, so there were only a few people in the class. The eyes looking at him were no longer as indifferent as before, but instead were filled with curiosity and awe. This is the aftermath of the grade competition a few days ago. He defeated the genius Sasuke without any controversy, and after that other contestants of the same grade gave up decisively when they heard his name. Yifeng, who only played one game in total, became the undisputed number one in the grade. Such a brilliant record naturally attracted everyone's attention. Even the bad negative reviews from the past have almost disappeared now. After all, the essence of the ninja school is to cultivate qualified ninjas, and in the world of ninjas, the strong are respected. Now Yifeng is the strongest in the entire grade, so naturally he is treated differently by other students. Of course. This kind of special treatment is only limited to passers-by who don't have much interaction with Yifeng. Good friends like Naruto and Shikamaru will not look at him differently. There was also the short-haired girl in front of him, who came close to him with a soft and weak expression. She still looked at Yifeng with evasive eyes, and her pretty cheeks were flushed. Good morning, Hinata. Yi Feng greeted the girl with a smile. He had no further thoughts about Hinata, nor was he prepared to distance himself from her. The girl now was too immature for him, like a child, while Yi Feng himself was an adult. "Good morning, classmate Yi Feng." Hinata lowered her head and spoke in a halting voice, "Congratulations on getting first place in the grade." "Thank you." Although Yi Feng didn't take the honor of being the top student in the grade seriously, he still thanked him sincerely. "Well, that." Hinata didn't dare to look at the boy in front of her, and looked to the side. "Student Yi Feng, I want to ask you." "Yi Feng, you're here really early today." Naruto's voice interrupted Hinata's next words. "Shikamaru hasn't arrived yet." Walking straight up the stairs, he noticed Hinata standing opposite Yi Feng, who had little presence. "Hey, what important thing were you guys talking about just now? Did I interrupt you?" No. Hinata lowered her head and whispered, "I'll take my leave first." The little bit of courage that the girl had just mustered disappeared in an instant, and she wanted to run away. Open black lens bracket shoes. Close black lens bracket. The golden option interface suddenly unfolded in front of Yi Feng, making him stunned for a moment. 1. Take Hinata's hand in front of Naruto and ask her if she is free tonight. 2. Touch Kushina's cheek in front of Naruto and praise her for being great. Damn it. This dog system is really toxic. Yi Feng's face turned dark, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Seriously speaking, these two tasks are not very difficult to complete, but they are extremely insulting. One was supposed to be Naruto's future wife in the original work, and the other was his biological mother. And what this dog system is asking Yi Feng to do now is to confront the Minotaur in person, which is the ultimate insult to a pure love warrior. Hateful. Yi Feng took a deep breath and pretended to be calm and said, "Wait a moment, Hinata-san." Huh. Hinata turned around in confusion and found that the boy was gradually approaching her. Her heart began to beat non-stop. "Yi Feng, you." Before he could finish his words, Yi Feng grabbed his hand. Puff. Hinata's face turned blood red, her pupils dilated, and her breathing became rapid. "Hinata-san, do you have time tonight?" Yi Feng asked, trying to suppress his inner embarrassment and remaining calm. Late evening. Hinata couldn't bear it anymore and mosquito coils started to appear in her eyes. What does Yi Feng mean by this? Dating. Was he inviting me out on a date? Was that really possible? Did he sense my feelings? For a moment, the girl's little brain was full of thoughts. As she continued to think, her shyness gradually broke through the critical point. Just when Hinata was about to faint, Yi Feng finally let her go. Open black lens bracket. Congratulations on getting the Meow Meow house. Close black lens bracket. What? The reward prompt that popped up made Yi Feng stunned and look surprised. Build a special dollhouse, into which any creature that does not resist or loses consciousness can be thrown and transformed into a doll. Meow Meow house. Yi Feng finds it a bit difficult to comment on this award. This ability is indeed powerful, but what is the significance? A living figurine, right? Yi Feng-kun. Hinata's voice, as soft as a mosquito's buzz, interrupted Yi Feng's thoughts. I can do it at night. Without giving him a chance to explain, she ran back to her seat. Yi Feng, so you and Hinata. Naruto patted his shoulder with a surprised expression on his face. We have nothing, don't think too much. Yi Feng took a breath and said lightly. I understand. Naruto showed a sly smile on his face and even raised his hand to give him a thumbs up. You know, a hammer. Yi Feng now has a very painful stiffness feeling. Kushina, what do you think about this? Uchiha Makoto's solemn voice sounded in his heart. Shut up. Kushina was obviously in a bad mood. Although it has long been said that young people's affairs should be left to young people to handle themselves, the shock of this scene really broke through Kushina's defense bottom line. Who can tolerate the boy you like flirting with your future daughter-in-law right in front of you? From Kushina's perspective, it's literally double the green. What's even more outrageous is that his own son actually seems to be happy to see it happen. What the hell did I do wrong? It's a curse, believe me. Yi Feng explained seriously. You two shut up and don't talk to me for now. Kushina said angrily. Yi Feng sat down obediently and ignored his good brother who was full of gossip. The students in the class walked into the classroom one after another. Shikamaru appeared in front of him with a lazy expression. Naruto stood up and was about to greet him, but he saw Sakura and Ino following closely behind him. He immediately left his good brother aside and shouted at the top of his voice, "Sakura! Very good, this operation is worthy of Gotham citizens." Yi Feng secretly complained in his heart, but on the surface he smiled and greeted these acquaintances. "Yi Feng, you finally showed up." Jingye was also very happy to see Yi Feng. She waved her hand and said, "I heard that you changed your blind date again these 2 days." Yi Feng glanced at Naruto. He had reason to suspect that this big mouth was spreading rumors everywhere. But he didn't explain, and nodded slightly. This time it was a big sister with black hair. Black hair. Naruto frowned and muttered, "It's the same hair color as that stinky guy. I don't like it. It's classmate Yi Feng who's on a blind date, not you." Sakura snorted coldly, and said with a worried look on her face, "Sasuke-kun won't disappear again today, right?" "No." Not long after he finished speaking, Sasuke walked into the classroom with his hands in his pockets. His appearance made the noisy classroom quiet for a moment. The fact that the opponent was forced to change into a gothic Lolita style during the grade competition has spread throughout the entire ninja school and has become a topic of conversation among students during breaks. Now that the real culprit has appeared, these students are naturally a little nervous. However, Sasuke ignored these people and walked straight to Yi Feng. He took out the scroll from his bag and said calmly, "I have completed your request." Naruto, Sakura, Ino and Shikamaru were all stunned, watching the interaction between the two with a puzzled look on their faces.